The Fallout show on Amazon Prime is not a good show. It's a show that suffers from inherent issues, most of them intentional, others not so much, that function as a backhanded insult to any actual fans of the Fallout franchise. And I say actual fans of the Fallout franchise because I need to discriminate between the fans of the Fallout franchise and those that just seem to take glee at the fact that you, an OG fan of Fallout, are not enjoying something. This show is a monstrosity that wears the suit of the Fallout franchise so seals can clap along to it and claim to recognize aspects from it. This show is a failed abortion carried to the end of its term. Not in the hopes that it'll turn out fine, but because the writers, directors, producers, and Bethesda wanted to spit in the face of people who actually care about this franchise and tend to criticize them so they could destroy everything that was there, from lore to how characters act, all because they're really getting tired of people saying that other people wrote better things than they did. This show suffers from a bad plotline, constant lore breaks, intentional lore breaks, and yes, I will prove that in my review, bad editing, bad CGI, and characters just not knowing how to behave. You see, this is the second recording of my review, and I say second recording because the first one is so fucked that I can't even open it anymore. Thanks, video editor. But in it, I had a section dedicated to things I actually liked about the show that I actually just want to throw out the window, because the more I watch this show in editing and writing, I just keep finding more issues with it, and things that I brought up as good points to defend the show with, I can't use anymore. So here's how this review is going to work. I'm going to talk about the show's structure, which includes the writing, editing, CGI, and so on. Then I'm going to dissect the plot, not in the sense that I'll be nitpicking and trying to look for as many errors as I can, because I don't have to do that, but only addressing the biggest lore breaks and then sticking to what the show presents itself as. You cannot talk about this show without talking about the lore breaks, and anyone who claims otherwise is downright delusional, and you'll find out why when we get to the plot segment. But before we even get into the review, I have to dedicate a small segment to the fanboys. And before any of the raging retards that are the subjects of the conversation start typing away in the comment sections below, just hear me out, like you would have done to Mr. House if you had actually played the game he's in. The comments that I have been getting on my videos, neither of which were reviews, one of which was literally an unscripted impressions video, is some of the most vitriolic and barely sapient copium that I've ever seen in my entire life, and yes, I do mean that entirely literally. From people pretending to have played all the previous games saying that there were no retcons in the show, to lobotomized flamingos trying to pretend that this show has good writing and not being able to back it up or even explain their points, to using appeals to authority such as insert person here liked it, therefore it's a good show, and of course taking glee in the fact that they know that other people are not having fun and enjoying things. The defense of this show has been so mentally horrifying that I'm actually starting to hate the people doing it. Not the people that enjoyed the show saying that they liked it, that they had fun, because that's subjective and I can't stop you from doing that. I'm referring to the people who legitimately believe things about the show that aren't true and spend their days flooding you with so much shit that they catapult you into the YouTube partner program, and in the span of 24 hours got me to start earning a revenue just from the flood of idiocy that they've been sending my way. Thanks for that, you fucking idiots, but just to humor them, just to humor the idiots for a second, I am going to use this review to prove that this show not only retconned Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas, but also committed various sins that you never should do when writing. Sins, by the way, that are so serious that if the situation was slightly different would be grounds for a lawsuit. I am going to explain the issues with this show as impartially as I can from the perspective of someone who has played the games, not from the perspective of a tourist who just claps whenever they recognize something on the screen. With that out of the way, I am Enclave Emily, and this is my review of Fallout on Amazon Prime.
The time for talk has passed. The Lord's work must be done.
When it comes to the fundamental aspects of this show, the prop design is the one that can receive most praise, but it's not without flaws. The vaults, vault suits, and a lot of the posters you see around are very faithful to the show, as are the two laser weapons you see in the show. Yes, 2 laser weapons in Fallout. The costumes are mostly fine, as are a lot of the environments, minus the fact that we get to go around a bunch of big cities with skyscrapers. But what isn't fine, along all the other things, is the editing and CGI of this show. The editing and CGI of this show is some of the most baffling that I've ever seen in my entire life. In regards to the editing, there's very obvious mistakes, such as the choreography in fight scenes or in other scenes, such as when the bombs drop and people are falling over when they're at a distance, because they fall in the wrong direction, and that's just one example. But another example would be in one scene where the Brotherhood is taking off in the direction of the city, that's their stated goal, but you can see the vertibirds flying in the wrong direction. Basic things you would think would have been noticed in the editing room when somebody was watching the show back before publishing it. But what really hurts, what really hurts about this part is the CG, and yes, I do mean it literally hurts. Special effects such as blood look like they're from a TV commercial from the early 2000s, and the CG for the environment makes it painfully obvious that these people are just in a green screen room, surrounded by a circular green screen that not only is it so inconsistent with itself within the very same camera shot, but it also makes your eyes hurt, and looks like textures that they used for the CG were literally compressed and copy-pasted 20 times before actually being put in the editing for this show. Consider first and foremost this example of where these two characters are entering this cave, and you can see the forest in the background from two different angles, and it doesn't even look like the same forest. It's jarring as fuck. Holy shit, just look at this. To muddy-ass textures being used in very important scenes that just take away from that very same scene. Consider this bomb crater in an important city that we'll get to, that they pan out to show and to shock the audience that might know what this city is supposed to be. And yes, I say supposed because it's gonna come back later. And all you can see is this muddy-ass texture on the crater that looks worse than Fallout 3 on console. But the most offensive part about the CGI has to be when it's so jarringly bad that it makes your eyes strain and forces you to unfocus. First, you have this scene next to that very same bomb crater I just mentioned where it looks like nothing is actually there. Just focus on it for a second and you'll see what I mean. To another scene, which I will not put in motion in this review because it made my eyes start hurting to the point where I had to look away. So I'll just put a screenshot of it here on screen, and it gets worse the longer you look at it, and it's eye straining while in motion. I'll just keep it up while I talk about this, but you know, I grew up with a lot of shows that had terrible special effects, terrible CGI, partly due to the fact that they're old and partly due to the fact that many of them were low budget. But this has to be the first time where I actually forced myself to look away because of how bad it was. And it's bad because, in case you haven't noticed with these different scenes, the sets are so bad and horrible that the only way to mask them is to slap a bajillion fucking effects on it, such as a double fisheye lens, blur, motion blur, and messing with the hue of it. I mean, for fuck's sake, they even did it to some of the props. Keep looking at this image like, for fuck's sake, look at it. Does it actually look like they're in an area, or does it look like they're standing on top of the muddiest texture you've ever seen, and a background conjured up by someone who's just taking their first day of class in CGI, and is also due to fail? But the most offensive part of the fundamental aspects of this show has to be the writing. Throwing all the lower breaks aside just for the sake of it for a second, this show is incapable of maintaining consistency within itself. The things that this show presents us sometimes get contradicted within the same episode and sometimes within the same half of the episode. Moreover, big oh shit moments later are so stupid that you can only nail it down to convenience. When it comes to justifications, that is. This show doesn't so much have a plot as it has events. Characters just meeting up with each other in a giant wasteland because of course they do. To it being established in the first 5 minutes that the vaults trade with one another, only for the vaults to be raided by raiders infiltrated disguised as vault dwellers and nobody recognizes them. Despite the fact that, at the best case interpretation, they should have seen each other 3 months prior. Some characters have literal plot armor, and believe me, I will get to that. But yes, I do literally mean literal plot armor. Characters knowing how to fix issues, yet not fixing them despite having stated that they know exactly how to fix those issues. Looking at you, Cooper Howard, fighting the power armor, despite knowing how to one-tap power armor. To plot twists making no sense, and execution of the plans related to the plot twists also making no sense. To the shitty excuse of humor that this show tries to pass off as entertainment. That's another thing I hate about this show. This show cannot take itself seriously. There is not one tense scene in this show that doesn't get broken up by characters magically becoming retarded for the sake of a C- tier joke, and that just ruins every single tense moment in this show. Imagine, if you will, a character about to be executed by crazy vault dwellers with a sword, only for the people who put them in those chains, preparing her for execution, using that very same sword to cut her free of the restraints they put that character in 5 minutes prior. And of course, failing at cutting the restraints because haha humor. But one thing that I can't even classify as haha humor in this show is the constant, barely disguised fetish of these writers in the form of some of the worst sex jokes and sexual commentary that I have seen in my entire life, and yes, I grew up with the old internet. You cannot convince me that the sexual humor in this show isn't just the writers trying to get horny. Because not only did they successfully manage to make every single character in this show, and yes, I do mean every single character in this show, uncharacteristically stupid, but they also humiliate those very same characters by giving them dialogue such as,
You wanna make my cock explode now?
Christ, who wrote this?
And of course, incestuous pedophilia, because that's hilarious. And no, YouTube algorithm, that's not me advertising it, that's me simply saying what the show did. The writing legitimately feels like a backhanded insult to every single Fallout fan out there that enjoyed the franchise's themes for what they were. After all, this is the franchise that handled rape, genocide, suicide, despair, losing hope, enslavement, and a lot of other things, and still managed to include the occasional satire in it. But the writing of this show is so bad that it makes the Nuka-Cola crazy bitch from Fallout 3 seem like genius comedic writing. Real Shakespearean level shit compared to this. But if turning every single character in this show uncharacteristically retarded and ruining every aspect people loved about the characters in the different Fallout games wasn't enough, and filling it with shitty humor, they now inserted their own shitty politics into it. Fallout always had some political themes in it, and that was fine because it was either satirical or more general in the sense that you didn't feel like you were being educated by the writers on what you should think about in terms of politics. But this show committed a cardinal sin by allowing writers like this to get their greedy paws on it, because not only did they manage to fuck the point of the most famous catchphrase possibly in all of gaming history, that being war never changes, but they also managed to retcon every single Fallout game prior to this by shoving their shitty politics into it. And if you're wondering how they did that, well, you're gonna have to wait for the plot segment of this review. But let's just say that they tried to retcon the entire reason that Fallout even exists in the first place. The intention of the writers was to retcon Fallout 1, 2, New Vegas. And if you're wondering how I'm going to substantiate that and prove that along with every single other assertion I've made so far, well then you'll have to see the plot segments of this show, because this show is absolutely horrendous and there is no way I can explain it without dissecting the plotline. They're very original and totally not done before in the Fallout franchise plotline. Oh, what am I saying? I can't prove that now, can I? So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so here's how the dissection of the plotline will work. Because the show jumps around a lot and it gets confusing, I'm first going to talk about the show setup in episode 1, that being from the introduction to when Lucy, the main character, leaves the vault. Then I'm going to split what happens later in 2. First, the underground vault plotline, which is the plotline where the characters that stay behind stay in the vault and things happen there. And then I'm going to go to the Wasteland plotline. I'm doing this because not only does it make it easier for me to dissect a lot of the problems with this show and keeps it in focus, but also because the Wasteland plotline is the one that has the most amount of issues, and knowing everything that happens in the underground plotline first allows me to explain a lot of the issues that you will see in a lot of better fashion than it would be if I otherwise didn't do this. So let's get into it, shall we? Starting with episode 1 setup. Starting off with episode 1, we see that despite the bombs having dropped at 9:40 AM according to Bethesda on the East Coast, it's daylight and almost 1 PM on the West Coast, because that works somehow. We see Cooper Howard, which everybody calls the Ghoul because nobody can actually remember his name, putting on a performance at a birthday party for kids with his daughter who's also attending. She's a diversity hire. No, I'm just kidding. She's actually there to show that the mother isn't in the scene, and it's made very obvious by her race. Don't you just love modern inclusivity making things way more obvious than they really should? Anyway, everybody's really worried about the possibility of nuclear Armageddon, and everybody talks about it, including Cooper's daughter. So to try calm her down, Cooper talks about it, saying that in the army, they tell you to raise your thumb to a nuclear blast, and if thumb is bigger than a nuclear bomb, then you're probably fine, but you should get away, and if the bomb is bigger than the thumb, then you're fucked. To which I say that the US Army must be staffed with a bunch of gender diversity hired retards, because if you look at a nuclear bomb, your eyes would go blind. Anyway, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the bombs drop in what is actually a pretty good scene. The shockwave hits the house, someone falls in the wrong direction, so Cooper takes his daughter, puts her on a horse, and starts galloping away in the direction of a nuclear bomb. What the fuck? Title card drop, and we now move on to 219 years later, where the actual main character, Lucy, is filing an application to be married with one of the people from the other vaults. This is because she has been unable to find a suitable marriage partner she's not related to, and she wants to take advantage of the triennial, which means 3 times a year, trade to make this happen. Now, I just want to point out one thing. A lot of people say that Lucy is a Mary Sue, and while yes, she is really good at a lot of things, I really don't see that. She's naive, but she also participates in a lot of clubs in the vault, and I see this as being no different from a character selection screen and character creation screen when we're all playing our Fallout games. Although I really don't believe she put a lot of points into intelligence. Anyway, she gets approved and goes to get her wedding dress while talking to Blonde Bitch, and yes, I call her Blonde Bitch because nobody knows her name. We can also see that Blonde Bitch is also very late in her abortion. I wrote abortion? What the fuck? Okay, no. She's actually very late in her pregnancy term, which makes me question why she's wearing a vault suit, since vault suits are supposed to be skin tight. Remember blonde bitch though, she's going to become relevant. Not in the sense that she's important to the plot, because this show really doesn't have much of a plot, but in the sense that she's involved with something that I've been teasing ever since my first video on this show. They go to the gate to Vault 32, but there seems to be a problem that they can't open it. You see, Chet, Lucy's cousin, is jealous of Lucy for getting married and says that he loves her? Lucy then says that she knows and explains to Chet that fooling around as kids is not a long-term sexual practice and so she needs to move on? Yeah, that's right. Chet is a cousin fucker and so is Lucy. In case you're wondering, this is not important to the plot in any way. Chet could very simply just not be Lucy's cousin and this dialogue could just not be here. But no, the writers of the show decided to include incestuous pedophilia because at first I thought it was humor, but knowing what I know about the show now, I think it's something else. And from now on, I'm going to call Chet a cousin fucker. So, convinced by Lucy's argument, cousin fucker opens the door, and the overseer, Hank, Lucy's dad, greets the 10 or so vault dwellers on the other side, in view of a bunch of other vault dwellers. Remember that. At the wedding, with Lucy's brother, Norm, who I forgot to mention, everyone seems happy, but the residents of Vault 32 are acting in a very strange way, using knives as forks, eating with their hands, having tattoos, and so on, and if you haven't caught on by now, they're raiders disguised as vault dwellers. Notice that I said raiders, not infiltrators. It'll be relevant way off into the future. Lucy and her new husband go into her room, we get a shot of a man's ass, don't worry, I'm not showing it, and we get a discount sex scene where Lucy is fully clothed, despite the fact that there was a line of dialogue earlier saying that the dress would come off very quickly. It's unnecessary, but whatever. Anyway, they're later in bed, Lucy starts hearing screams and gunfire, and being made suspicious by this, goes to her Pip-Boy, turns on the Geiger counter, or at least I presume she turns on her Geiger counter because it wasn't going off before, points it towards the man she just had sex with, and we can see that the Geiger counter goes so haywire with readings so insane that the skin of that man should be peeling off. Did everyone else in the vault just have their Pip-Boys turned off or something? I mean, what the fuck is this supposed to be? Some of these people work in engineering and have to come in contact with radiation to keep up the vault. So the fact that every single one of them had their Geiger counter turned off, even assuming that you can turn it off, is just slightly ridiculous. Another thing that's very ridiculous is that now that they figured out that they're raiders, I have to ask, how the fuck did nobody notice that they were raiders before? It was established 20 minutes before this, by the way, that the vaults have a triennial trade, and what triennial means is that it's 3 times a year, which is different from triannual. That right there is once every 3 years. So the fact that nobody in the vault found it suspicious that they didn't recognize anybody is just very convenient, because if they had, they would have shut the door immediately. This point is doubly as egregious for Hank, Lucy's dad. Oh, but I'll get to you. I'll get to Hank, you son of a bitch. Anyway, the raider tries to kill Lucy, but through the sheer power of convenience, Lucy fights him off and shoves glass in his face and throat. At least it looks like his throat. She walks around the vault and sees that the vault dwellers are being absolutely massacred. To the tune of, and here we go with one of the points and major issues I have with this show, an oldie song. Now, it's fine when an oldie song, like the one you're hearing in the background right now, is that it's fine if it's used once in a while, but this show uses them in absolute abundance. And if you don't know what the problem is with that, then I officially brand you as either a tourist or someone who's new to the Fallout franchise. You see, in previous Fallout games, you'd have maybe 1 or 2 oldie songs as introductions, or playing in the radio while you were patrolling the Wasteland. Most of the soundtrack in Fallout games is not like this. And they become really obnoxious because this show uses them so much that they have them interrupt every single fight scene. Do you know how annoying that is to have a tense fight scene, to be just desperate to have one tense fight scene that you can enjoy interrupted by a sometimes uncharacteristically loud oldie song? There were 2 before I mentioned this already, but they were fine, and I can assure you that every single one from now on is not. So I'll have a little counting gag for the amount of times that this show has unnecessary oldie music. Anyway, Lucy goes to see the massacre, and the massacre is in slow motion for some reason. It makes the fight scene drag on and it makes me take it not seriously. But ironically enough, the fight scene being in slow motion helps me a lot because it highlights the fact that the choreography in this show is subpar. And by subpar, I mean that it's really obvious that some vault dwellers are just standing around along with raiders, and that people are getting killed when they really shouldn't. Oh look, I slightly grazed your arm with this machete that I have now for some fucking reason. Guess you're dead now. We also see that blonde bitch, who again is also pregnant, lost her eye and is shooting shooting with a machine gun. I don't know what it is with modern shows and having pregnant women shoot. I don't know if that was meant to be funny or serious, but what I do know is that it's bad for you and it's really off-putting. I guess we gotta have uncharacteristically strong women in our shows and mediums nowadays, because those definitely didn't exist before and were totally not revered before the 2010s. Metroid. There is some cooperation in this scene. Chet's about to be murdered and one of the downed security guards, which we haven't seen up until this point, makes him trip and saves the cousin fucker's life. But other than that, this scene is just a fucking drag and takes on way too long. Lucy is watching all of this, taking time to hide her brother Norm, while the raider from her room teleports behind her, still alive somehow, and tries to kill her, only for Hank, Lucy's dad, to teleport behind him and kill him. When this happens, the show has one of its only good shots. You see, in the commotion, the projector burned up, and it gives it an apocalyptic feel in the background as the happy-go-lucky terrain that was being projected slowly burns up. All the while, you've got this doomsday music playing in the background. It's a really good shot. And you know what? If more shots and scenes in the show were like this, I probably wouldn't be as harsh as I am. Anyway, after being saved by the power of teleportation, Lucy and Hank go to the gate of Vault 32 and find that a lot of Vault Dwellers who less than 5 seconds ago were in the field were all teleported to the gate of Vault 32 and are being held hostage by the leader of the Raiders, which, spoiler alert, is called Moldaver. Hank proclaims that he knows who she is, which makes the fact that he didn't know and nobody recognized them even worse, but I'll get to that because this fucking scene becomes really problematic later, but for now let's ignore it. But yeah, after being told that Hank knows who she is, Moldaver gives an ultimatum to Hank. Hank must choose between the other Vault Dwellers and his daughter. When I saw this, I was wondering out loud what the hell he was going to do. It was a very difficult decision. Would he choose to save the life of the few remaining members of his vault? Or would his fatherly instincts take over and save Lucy? A really impactful scene. I wonder where they're going with this. Hank grabs Lucy, locks her in a storage room, gets sedated, taken away, and Moldaver deploys an explosive that takes so long to blow up that she inherently lets all the other Vault Dwellers survive. So what the fuck was that ultimatum even for? Did it even mean anything? Well, the answer is no, and this scene right here is where the show starts to plummet. It wasn't terrible up until now, but this ultimatum shows what the rest of this show is going to be like. Things are going to be said only to be ignored straight away right after. Later, after the bombs have exploded, the Vault Dwellers are discussing the situation, and there's a lot more Vault Dwellers here than there were even before the Raiders showed up. Where did they come from? I have no fucking idea. But Lucy, disheartened by the idea that the other Vault Dwellers don't want to go up to the surface, goes up to the surface, convincing cousin fucker and her brother Norm to help out. Not help out on the surface, just helping her get to the vault gate. Norm stays behind because he says he's a coward. The cousin fucker tries to dissuade her but agrees, and Lucy exits the vault. She exits the vault and we can see that it's right next to Santa Monica Pier. What the fuck? No. I'm sorry. I'm not letting this slide. For those of you that don't know, in Fallout 1, there was a mutant master who had an army ready to take over the wasteland and turn every single human they saw into super mutants. And if they couldn't do that, they just kill the rest. The master, as people called him, had a cathedral where his most loyal followers and strongest super mutant soldiers were at. The cathedral was in Los Angeles. In fact, if we look at a map of Los Angeles now, Lucy is almost within shouting distance of where the cathedral is. Given that the master's MO was to crack open any vault they saw and kidnap or kill any vault dwellers, you have to be fucking shitting me if you think I'm going to believe that the master and his super mutant army did not notice a vault in the open right there next to Santa Monica Pier. This is made all the worse when you realize that the master cracked open most, if not every vault on their way to Central California, which is where Shady Sands is, the capital of the NCR. I do not believe for a second that this vault survived. But good fucking job anyhow. You've just made Fallout 1, the primary plot point of Fallout 1, be almost impossible. And we're not even done with episode 1. But what we are done with is the first segment of this review with all the setting up. Lucy's about to go on her adventure to find her dad, but we're going to come back to that later and focus on the story inside the vault first, because it's more of a side plot than anything, and though it does tie back to the main plot line, I do just want to talk about it first and get a lot of things out of the way, and it'll help us understand some things in the future. Starting with the underground plot with a fucking oldie song, because what else would we started with? We see that Cousin Fucker and Norm, Lucy's brother, are getting reprimanded for having helped Lucy escape the vault. This scene alone goes to show how shallow some of the characters are, because Cousin Fucker is legitimately having an existential crisis after leaving the overseer's office, or whatever the fuck that room is, just because he's not gatekeeper anymore. The guy whose entire job is to push buttons and open doors is having an existential crisis just because he can't push buttons and open doors anymore. No, I'm not exaggerating, it's literally that pathetic. Norm is up next, but the people punishing him are struggling because Norm has held almost every single position in the vault and he never liked any of them. So they're struggling to find a way to demote him and punish him. As a result of this, they put him on food delivery duty for the prisoners that they captured when the vault was raided. Hold on. The raiders had the vault dwellers at their mercy. How the hell did they manage to capture so many of them? Fuck if I know, I guess, and fuck if the show knows, I guess, as well. Because this is never explained again, and it's basically forgotten. But I want you to remember the fact that these raiders were captured here in this vault, because it's going to become very prevalent later, because this is one of those shows where the more it reveals, the dumber it gets. However, I have to say, when it comes to offensive scenes, this is most certainly not one of them. It's fine for what it is, I guess. Fast forward a little bit, and the vault is having a meeting, where they are deciding what exactly to do with the raider captives that they had. It specifically stated that they captured 16 of them. Kind of odd, since I don't remember seeing that number when all the raiders and infiltrators were there. In episode 1, that is. The scene actually had me invested for a moment. I found myself wondering how the hell are these vault dwellers, isolated from everything, going to deal with raiders they captured. And you can even see their lifelong programming taking over based on the way that they present the issue, talking about shared values, and this scene is gonna fuck it up in an instant, isn't it?
The young man Woody interrogated this morning? He left an impression on me.
That is the gentleman who showed me his butthole.
That's right, just when the plotline was starting to get interesting, they extrapolate someone showing them their ass as a desire to communicate. Now, there's being programmed and isolated and not understanding the outside world, and then there's shit like this. I don't care how isolated they are, this is just making a mockery out of the situation. It was from this point that I stopped taking them seriously, because any legitimate character that they had going for themselves as a bunch of isolated, ignorant vault dwellers is gone. Exchanged for the writers attempting to stay goofy, as they themselves say, by using literal preschool jokes. People in the audience who have much younger siblings than them will know that jokes like this are downright baby tier. How anyone above the age of 13 actually enjoyed the humor in this show is beyond me. And the thing is, the show tries to take itself seriously based off of this, because they use someone showing them their ass crack as evidence that they can, quote, reach out across the cultural divide and integrate these bloodthirsty, raping raiders. And based on this alleged attempt at communication, they propose reading Shakespeare to them, and people clap along. I could harp on this scene, but I'm not going to. Pregnant Bitch and Norm are the only ones who are moderately agreeable, because they seem to be in dismay at this even being suggested. That's when another nameless rando, a vault technician I guess, comes in and says that the water chip is damaged and that they have 2 months of water left. Now, how dare you stand where he stood? Completely ignoring the question as to how the hell the water chip even got damaged in the first place, and how the hell they don't even have a replacement, this ends up being not so much a gentle nod as it is a forceful nod to Fallout 1. You know, the Fallout game they made almost impossible simply by putting Vault 33 within shouting distance of the cathedral. And of course, go figure, this ends up being mostly forgotten by the end of the show, and by mostly I mean entirely, because I guess they're going to elaborate on this in season 2. Though I quite seriously doubt that was planned. No, really, from this point on, the water chip problem gets completely ignored, and people forget it's even a thing after this scene ends. But yeah, they reference the destruction of the water chip just like in the main plotline of Fallout 1, simply so the people who want to defend this show for being faithful to the Fallout franchise can point to things without even thinking about it, and so the writers can mask the fact that this show has no real story. The next time we see the Vault Dwellers are an entire episode later, where the 2 bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol are observing one of the captured raiders, pondering the idea that they spent 200 years with no contact, and I really have to wonder what the fuck they're even talking about. These guys managed to outsmart you, infiltrate a vault, and if they hadn't started opening fire, you would have been none the wiser to the fact that they were raiders, and yet you want me to believe that these Vault Dwellers, as isolated as they are, haven't even considered considered just for a single moment that maybe people on the surface aren't as ape-like as they think they are. Again, I get the idea of what they're going for here. They're so sheltered they don't even consider some things. But not only does this go against the behavior of every single other vault that was established in the Fallout lore, it ends up being so stupid that it actively sucks me out of it. By the way, a quick note that I want to leave here for later, much later, is that despite being relatively well organized before, these raiders have always been acting like raiders. They have been acting as if they had to survive on primal instincts their entire lives, which not only kind of contradicts how they were when they were first introduced, but it's also going to become very important eventually. We fast forward to a scene where Betty and Norm are sitting down having a conversation, and Betty is talking in a way like she's going to be revealed as the big bad guy later. No, really, it's that obvious. She even reminds Norm of how his voice is dangerous. Ooh. She even tells Norm that regular boys can get angry and pee on the wall? Can the show even help itself at this point, or does it just enjoy being disgusting? It could have been a legitimately tense scene, and it kind of was, but the show's writing just outright kills it because characters will just say things that not only make no sense, but are so off-putting that you can't help but just to notice it. I was pulling an all-nighter while watching this episode, so I wasn't exactly in my most awake state, and I just remember being weirded out. We then cut to what is possibly one of the worst and most offensive scenes in this entire show that legitimately made me question the intelligence of a lot of the people who claim to enjoy this show and say that the humor was good. This fucking scene, when I watched it, legitimately made me pause the episode and go off to do something else. No, really, it's so bad that I had to stop watching to just go watch some other YouTube videos and play some games. And I kid you not, it was right fucking here that I started thinking out loud what the fuck is wrong with a lot of people. And this scene right here thoroughly convinced me that a lot of the sexual humor in this show is nothing more, nothing less than the disguised fetish of the writers. Or rather, I should say, all sexual humor in this show is the disguised fetish of the writers. This, you see, is the waterfall scene. I call it the waterfall scene because calling it what it actually is, in more literal terms, would disgust people and probably get YouTube to start hiding my comments even on my own YouTube channel. Pregnant bitch goes up to cousin fucker's room and checks in to see on how he's doing. They have a short discussion on how pregnant bitch's late husband used to be a shoe addict and how he would talk about shoes until everyone else had left the room. Because that's humor, I guess. I don't know. Did this joke land for anybody at all? She then asks for help from cousin fucker to help sort out her late husband's things. Eventually, where they reach the point where they pull out her late husband's sweater, because apparently he had one of those when all the people in the vault wear is vault suits, and his scarf as well, but that's not really the point. Pregnant bitch tells cousin fucker to put on his clothes and then starts delusionally imagining that cousin fucker is actually her husband, her late husband. Something I found very weird because cousin fucker and her late husband looked nothing alike other than skin tone. But of course, because this show can't help itself, she now believes that cousin fucker is her dead husband, and because she thinks cousin fucker is her dead husband, she starts getting horny and they start making out. If you're not weirded out yet, you're about to be, because we get a setup where it looks like they're about to have some lobotomized chimpanzee sex, only for the show to turn around and...
Now that is one wet lady.
It's the movement that gives it the sound.
Yeah, I had to watch that, so now you did too. First of all, add another to the counter. Secondly, if this doesn't convince you that this is just the writers' disguised fetish, then don't worry, I will do a lot more convincing later because the show did that for me. Remember guys, this is the franchise that dealt with rape, enslavement, genocide, despair, suicide, and a lot more, and captivated people with those themes and occasional satire. Now turned into, well... But if you so much as dare question any of this shit, remember, you're just a New Vegas purist. I have a question for all three people that actually made it this far into the review that actually still like the show. And that question is, how? If you liked it, you liked it. And I can't stop you from enjoying something. But still, how? Also, weren't these vault suits supposed to be skin tight? How the hell did that waterfall even happen? But yes, this is the show that's getting 9s out of 10s, 10s out of 10s, and 8 out of 10s. Dealing with a post-apocalyptic future. Two characters going through grief and identity crises, and instead of taking that and doing something with it, it turned it into, well...
us.
Thankfully, the scene doesn't last much longer after that, and we get to see Norm going to feed the prisoners. To Norm's credit here, he actually takes advantage of the fact that everybody in the vault seems to be a raging retard who only wants jelly cake, and actually gets one of the other vault dwellers to leave him alone with the prisoners for a second. Good on you, Norm. Good stuff there. He talks briefly with one of the prisoners, and the prisoner tells him that whatever was going on in Vault 32 is anything but innocent, which piques Norm's curiosity. So he goes back to his room, to his computer, I presume, and tries to access the logs, only for it to be denied. Seeing this, he decides to go to Cousin Fucker's room, where pregnant bitch is giving birth, convinces him to follow along, and then they go to Vault 32. Pushing past the debris and entering Vault 32, they find that the place is a fucking mess. Crops long rotten, bodies all over the floor, writing all over the wall, and so on. Eventually, they make it to the Overseer's office, which has blood writing all over the walls, somehow. Access the computer in the Overseer's office, and find out that the way that the raiders got in was by using the Pip-Boy from Norm's mom. These three scenes, and yes, they're three different scenes, aren't actually that bad in and of themselves, but they raise a quick problem as to vault security, because Lucy's mom, Rose, spoiler alert, is from Vault 33. Yet the overground door to Vault 32 is never seen. And the raiders use the Pip-Boy from Vault 33 to access Vault 32, meaning that this show is directly stating that you can just have a Pip-Boy, and as long as you have a Pip-Boy, you're able to access any vault. Or at least most vaults, which begs the question as to why the hell the raiders had to disguise themselves as residents of Vault 32 to enter Vault 33. Because if they can just use any Pip-Boy to open any vault door, then couldn't they have just used that to Vault 33? And skipped going into Vault 32 entirely? Oh, sorry, I forgot I had to turn off my brain to enjoy this show, because the writers clearly didn't think anything about it, so I shouldn't either. And before you come up with the excuse that they didn't know where the entrance to Vault 33 was, you can shut the fuck up about that. Because the entrance to Vault 33 is in the open and in one of the most recognizable places in that region. Golly fucking gee, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I wonder why everybody, and I do mean everybody, insists that you turn your brain off while watching the show, because if you don't do that, it becomes really fucking retarded. Not like it isn't failed lobotomy levels of intelligence anyway, but you know. I was gonna cut off this segment now and move on to the next part, but while editing this, I realized another issue with this entire scene, and that is that most, if not all of the people in Vault 32 killed themselves. The reason they killed themselves is because of quote-unquote management, which is a reference to Vault 31. And what was that experiment? Well, to make managers, of course. So instead of the entire vault that apparently was in on it trying to overthrow Vault 31 or warn Vault 33, or, just trying to leave to the surface, what they did was kill themselves. Contrived writing in this show, ladies and gentlemen. Things just happen and decisions get made just because the writer said so. The next time we see Norm and Cousin Fucker, they're leaving Vault 32, but stop on the way to check out the gates to Vault 33 after finding out that everyone in Vault 32 is dead. This scene doesn't exactly lead anywhere or have any meaning, as it's basically forgotten, considering that everything else that was necessary to establish the fact that Vault 32 is fucked was already shown. But unlike my life, it actually has a purpose, that is displaying terrible CG and set design. They come across a bunch of bodies stacked on the way to Vault 31, and one thing I have to question is, if this was a mass suicide, what the hell are these bodies doing here? It wasn't anything from Vault 31 that killed them, as we'll see later, because Vault 31 is effectively harmless. We have a dead body basically standing up and holding a welder. How the hell did that die, and how the hell is the body like that? The gate to Vault 31, in the multiple shots that we see, it looks different every single time and looks like CG from the early 2000s. No, not cinematic CG, advertisement CG. I mean, look at this fucking door. Did you run out of memory space when it came to putting in this texture or something? Did you have a memory leak which caused the editing program to crash? You have Norm's Pip-Boy, which isn't even on his arm and looks 3 times bigger than what it's supposed to. And you have a body which died with its hand on the vault door, which I guess was put there for dramatic effect, except for the fact that you can see where they put a wire on the arm of the prop that they used for the body. Also, if the implication here is that they were trying to break into Vault 31, well, they did a shit job, because that vault door looks fantastic. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of the fact that it looks basically new. There you go. If you watch the show, you probably didn't notice it when you first watched it, but now that I've pointed it out, you can't unsee it. Because of course, every time there's bad CG, they put weird camera angles, weird effects, weird lighting, just hoping that you won't notice it. But of course, I and a lot of other people in voice chat on Discord did. And mind you, I wasn't exactly in a sober state, if you will. So if I can notice that, you should have noticed it too. They go back to the vault and Betty finds them while they're re-entering and asks what they were doing. All this scene really serves is to hint that Betty Betty may be the bad guy secretly. Ooh. You know, as if it wasn't obvious that the minority character in a modern show isn't actually gonna be smarter than everyone assumes that they are. But at the very least, Betty isn't as offensive as the other characters in this show. Hell, I would actually say that Betty's setup is actually pretty decent and has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, it's underdeveloped. And it gets spoiled as well in about 5 minutes time in the show. Because the next time we see them, they're having an election for new overseer given that Hank is missing. The election is between the two bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol and Betty, and let me guess, Betty is gonna win with a crushing majority. Fucking hell, one of the bumblefucks that we see doesn't even vote for himself. Sorry, did I say 5 minutes time? I meant to say about 3. While all of this is happening, Norm, who previously couldn't access overseer logs, accesses overseer logs somehow in his room and finds out that every single overseer since the start of this vault has been from Vault 31. Wait, hold on. Do they actually expect us to believe that nobody in 220 years has noticed the fact that every single overseer has been from Vault 31? So let me just quickly delve into what this scene is telling us. Every single overseer has been from Vault 31. The first 3 overseers ruled for a combined total of 24 years. Judging by the sound effects, there seems like there were around 8 or 9 overseers. Hank McClane, the latest overseer, ruled for 26 years. So 24 plus 26 is 50, meaning that 4 or 5 overseers ruled for 150 to 170 years. Also, it says that Hank McClane was overseer until 2297. This show takes place in 2296, right? Best faith interpretation is that New Year's has passed, but the normal interpretation, that being me, someone capable of 3rd grade mathematics, and with the attention span just slightly longer than the average TikTok user, I can remember that this show started in 2296, and Hank McClane was kidnapped on that very same day in 2296. Also, breaking my own review structure here, we get a scene in the Wasteland plot where Lucy says that she has been in the Wasteland for 2 weeks, meaning that even if they waited until the very last second to remove Hank from the overseer position, then it's still highly unlikely for New Year's to have passed because that's 351 extra days in the year. Now, you might think I'm nitpicking here, and I kind of am, but this is my way of telling you that, as revealed by an interview, and as hinted by the fact that this show feels very convenient and forced together, they either removed the part of the show where more time passes, or they just outright forgot about it. I know, it's not a big point against the show. They forgot one date on a computer screen in a very important scene, very convenient. But this just goes to show the amount of things you can notice wrong with this show, to the point where they make such a big deal about dates, but then, and let's be honest here, even if you like the show, they just forget to change a date on a very important scene on a computer screen. But I'm more left wondering how the hell 5 overseers ruled for 150 years, and how the hell nobody has noticed so far that every single overseer has been from Vault 31. This is supposed to be an oh shit moment and a revelation of sorts, but at this moment I'm just apathetic because they've made the Vault Dwellers so unfathomably, unbelievably stupid that, other than Norm and Betty, that every single other Vault Dweller has completely lost any relevance to the plot and function merely as whatever the hell the writers need to make an oh shit moment and propagate their stupid fucking plot. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Betty wins with a 98% majority, and only Norm finds something suspicious in this. I guess he's probably a Trump-supporting right-wing conspiracy theorist or something. And they make jelly cake because they have a running joke about jelly cake being the only thing they like to eat in this vault. Get that jelly mold out of here! Now, if your attention span is literally longer than 1 minute long, you might have remembered the part where I mentioned how the fuck nobody has noticed that every single overseer is from Vault 31. You might have also remembered that I said that every single Vault Dweller is just an instrument for whatever the writers want to do, even if it makes no sense. Well, they try to justify it in the scene because one of the bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol, who I just now figured out is called Woody, is talking to another Vault Dweller, a very old one. Woody from Bumblefuck Patrol is disappointed that he lost the election, and the old guy says that he ran for overseer position before, but he lost to Hank McClane in 2271, as we saw in the computer scene, as a result of a famine that happened that year. And then he says this.
You know what they say? When things look glum, vote for somebody from Vault 31.
That's right, the writers' justification as to how nobody has noticed that every single overseer is from Vault 31 and why nobody finds it suspicious is because of a saying. And there's an implication here that every time a new overseer, or almost every time a new overseer is elected, that some sort of crisis is manufactured. You see why I can't be bothered to give a fuck about any of these Vault characters other than Norm? 220 years is almost the entire time that the United States of America has existed in our world. You would think that this happening for 200 years straight would raise some sort of suspicion, but no, I guess not. It's just the writers being lazy and not being creative enough to hide the fact that they're ripping off the plot. Oh geez, what was I saying there? I must be going crazy there. I feel like I've heard that before though, somewhere, haven't I? Nah, never mind. It's just my New Vegas purist brain. Moving on to the next scene. Very good question, Norm. Of course, Cousin Fucker has no idea what to say or do, so Norm decides to ask blonde, formerly pregnant bitch about it because she's also from Vault 31. Let me guess, she's gonna be elected overseer in the future, isn't she? Of course, it goes nowhere. The only answer she can give is that there was better food in her vault. It's really obvious she's hiding something, and I get that that's the point, but come on, you could have done this a little bit better, couldn't ya? I mean, do the writers just think that their own audience are stupid or something? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, they do. Cut to the next day, and the residents of Vault 33 are inspecting Vault 32, and now, hold on just a second. Completely ignoring yet another oldie song, the entire vault is cleaned. Not just the bodies, not just the writing on the wall, which gives the answer that the management in Vault 31 is to blame. No, the entire vault is clear, and this is the day after. Even with an army of cleaning robots and staff, I don't think you would have been able to clean everything out and make things look brand new in such a short amount of time without anybody noticing. Is there a small army of cleaning robots in Vault 31? Did they get a bunch of residents from Vault 31 to come over and clean everything up? Well, I'm not gonna spoil it yet, but I'll tell you this, the answer is no. They just wanted yet another scene to reinforce how mysterious Vault 31 is supposed to be. We're almost there though, and I'll talk about it when it's more appropriate and we have all the information, but basically this scene just functions as another layer of, ooh, mysterious Vault 31. Just in case the stupid audience that these writers wrote this show for were too stupid to realize that maybe Vault 31 might be the bad guys. You might be thinking I'm being too rude there, but that's the only justification I can come up for why this scene works as it does. I mean, for fuck's sake, they even have to have flashbacks to where the bodies were, even though we saw the bodies this same episode. This is why modern franchises, not just Fallout, keep getting dumbed down. Because show writers pull shit like this, expecting you not to remember very important scenes that were literally shown less than 20 minutes prior, treating you like a brain-rotted idiot, and they get 9s out of 10s for it. But whatever. Oh, by the way, they're repopulating Vault 32. And apparently nobody in the vault questions why they couldn't just take the water chip from Vault 32, given that theirs is broken. I get that it's probably going to be fixed by itself, simply because it was probably just a manufactured crisis to get Betty elected, but still, the fact that nobody even raises this very simple point is kind of jarring. The next time we see the Vault plotline is a whole episode later. Norm walks into where the prisoner's being held to another oldie song, reused from episode 5 by the way, and finds out that all of the prisoners are dead, seemingly poisoned. He finds this very suspicious and goes to try to find Chet, cousin fucker, but not before we see Betty dispatching assignments via Pip-Boy to see who gets to stay in Vault 33 and who gets to go to Vault 32 to the tune of yet another oldie song, because of course. And of course, because the writers are children, during this mini montage of seeing who gets to go to 33 or 32, we get to see people on the toilet with their trousers down and blonde bitch shoving a pack of ice down her trousers. Whatever the implications you want to take from it, I'll let you take it. I'm just tired of this. After that edit is over, Norm and Chet meet up to talk, and it's strongly implied, basically downright admitted, that Chet has figured out that there's a lot of things wrong with what's going on, and he knows. He knows that this is manufactured, he knows that he's being manipulated, but he's too much of a coward, just like Norm says. Which I guess is the show trying to say that Norm is no longer the coward we were told he was in episode 1. Ignoring the edit and the oldie music, it's not a bad scene, all things considered. I'm just really sad that it's in this show. So while all the other Vault Dwellers are being transferred to Vault 32, to the tune of yet another fucking oldie song, Norm sneaks out, goes to Betty's computer, hacks it, just like in the video games, which is kind of nice, and tricks someone on the other end of Vault 31 into opening the gate so he can go see what's there for himself. But hey, look at that, an actual hacking scene pointing to how it works in the games. It made sense to include it, and they didn't have to rub it in your face multiple times just so you understood that it was a reference. Holy shit, the show actually did a good job. So Norm enters Vault 31, sees a bunch of things piled up, and some sort of voice coming from behind all of the clutter, along with some mechanical noises, and he goes to investigate, and it turns out that it's a robo-brain on a Roomba that got stuck because a broom fell. Really, though, a robo-brain on a Roomba. For context, here's what an actual robo-brain looks like in the games. You got one on thrusters and one on wheels, but was the budget of this show that fucked, or did they actually spend it on a lot of other things? Because really, a robo-brain on a Roomba. I mean, what the hell were they doing with the money for this show? Did they spend all of it in hiring one of the former child actors on Hannah Montana for it? Or something stupid like that? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I guess they did. Norm removes the broom out of the way, and the robot quickly realizes that he's not Betty. Having realized that he's compromised, he pulls out a needle with what I'm assuming is deadly poison, and prepares to attack Norm. Holy fucking shit, one of the few characters that's actually decent in this show in danger. I hope he can get out of this. Oh, Jesus fucking Mary and Joseph, can this show not help itself? Finally, some actual tension with a character that we actually slightly care about, and he slowly charges in the wrong direction and bumps into a trash bin in the process. Everything in this show is a joke. Instead of at least having some sort of tense scene where Norm is actually in danger, they just turned it into a joke. They couldn't even pretend that he was in actual danger for more than 5 seconds. This could be funny if done once, but given how every single tense scene is ruined by shit like this, I can't help but sigh in pure exasperation. So after walking past very slowly the world's most useless guard and opening the gates to Vault 31, using a switch that I can't help but notice is too tall for the Roomba to reach, he walks in and finds out that Vault 31 is actually just a giant corridor with computers and a bunch of people cryogenically frozen. I'll come back to this slightly when we're in the Wasteland plotline, but I see a lot of fucking issues that I've been dying to talk about so far. These are VTEC managers, aka the residents of Vault 31 who were cryogenically frozen until they were necessary. The experiments with these 3 vaults were to manage the vault dwellers and society, to guide them and over time turn them into what I guess are perfect junior managers or some shit like that. In other words, the plot twist for the vault plotline was that there was a secret vault controlling everything filled with a bunch of VTEC employees. Wow, what an original twist, what an original storyline. Except it isn't, because this is the plotline of Fallout Tactics. Not exactly, but close enough. Because in case you don't know, as is evidenced by the fact that most of the die-hard Fallout fans also didn't seem to notice this, in Fallout Tactics there is a vault called Vault Zero filled with a bunch of geniuses hooked up to machines preserved in a cryogenic status, aka frozen in cryopods, intended to function as the nucleus of the vault network, aka management of other vaults, with the final intention of, and stop me if this sounds familiar, creating the perfect society post-war. If the status of the Fallout franchise was slightly different, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody got sued for this shit. So yeah, good fucking job ripping off a previous game. Oh, did I say a previous game? I meant 2 previous games, because Fallout Brotherhood of Steel also has one of these in the corporate vault in that game, and that game is also full of VTEC employees, and this time, actual VTEC employees. Did they just really think that nobody would fucking notice this shit? Nobody would fucking notice the fact that they ripped off the plot twist of Fallout Tactics and the fucking VTEC vault, i.e. the corporate vault in Fallout Brotherhood of Steel? Congratulations, dipshits, you just retconned those 2 games, because the whole point of those 2 vaults, Vault Zero and Corporate Vault, was to have all the genius minds of the pre-war, both VTEC and not, in there. They're so creatively bankrupt that they had to rip off ideas that were already in Fallout, and inadvertently, or outright on purpose, which again, I'll get there, made those games almost impossible to happen, just because they couldn't come up with anything new. Good fucking god, my point of this review wasn't even to prove that they retconned Fallout Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel, or that they ripped off plots from previous games, but the more I look at this show, the more problems I find. And this is the show that fucking idiots, absolute fucking troglodytes, come to my comment sections to tell me is actually good and doesn't actually retcon anything because we haven't quote-unquote let them cook. If you fit that description, then fuck all of you, seriously, I don't even care anymore. Moreover, we get to see when the residents of the cryopods entered and left. We also don't see any other robots in this giant corridor full of cryopods, meaning that cleanup of Vault 32 is not possible, because, as the show tells us, all of them entered in 2077, not like 2 days ago or something. Moreover, when everybody gets woken up for the triannual trade with Vault 33, are a bunch of the residents of Vault 31 woken up to not arouse any suspicion? But I have another question. I have another very important question. How the fuck did Vault 31 have no idea what happened in Vault 32 until 33 was attacked? Did Vault 31 just not notice that everybody in Vault 32 died? Did nobody in Vault 31 notice that a bunch of raiders came in and took over? How exactly did Moldaver and her group not notice Vault 31 or even try to enter Vault 31? Assuming that the inter-vault trade happens once every 3 years, and assuming that Vault 31 knew about the rebellion at Vault 32, why exactly was nothing done about it? Why the hell has it not been cleaned up? Oh, that's right, because if it had been cleaned up earlier, then Betty, the new overseer of Vault 33, wouldn't have been able to spin the story that Vault 32's damage was done by raiders. But even that doesn't make sense, because Vault 32 was cleaned up to the point where it looks brand new. So even if the management was just waiting for an opportunity to be able to spin a story about the vault being damaged and needing repopulation, it still doesn't make any sense, because the only thing that remained damaged in Vault 32 after the cleanup was the overseer's fucking computer. But this scene just gets worse, because I've only been talking about the vault plotline in isolation. Oh, believe me, dear viewer, we are not done with this fucking scene. I am going to come back to this scene after we've done most of the Wasteland plotline, because the vault plotline is already bad enough in isolation, and it gets even worse in context. And the vault plotline is the best part of this show. But before I go into the Wasteland plotline, can I just also point out the fact that Norm gets locked in there and just goes into one of the cryopods? Between him and salvation, i.e. being able to get out, stands only a Roomba with an exposed brain that is too incompetent to even be a threat to Norm. Bud, the Roomba, tried to attack Norm, remember? And Norm managed to beat it by just standing still and slowly walking around it. Instead of pummeling the fucking brain into dust, or threatening to destroy the entire place unless he lets him go out, Norm just waddles into a cryopod and that's the end of the vault plotline. The show had finally created a character in this plotline that I actually slightly liked and wasn't completely stupid, and completely fucking ruined it by making him take the dumbest possible decision out of all of them. No, I'm not kidding, he doesn't even ponder it, he just gets told that he should probably wait in one of the cryopods, and he instantly does it. But again, we're gonna be coming back to this scene later. We're gonna be coming back to this, because this was the end of the vault plotline in episode 8, and this just gets so much worse. Okay, let's take a break here. Let's just relax, take a small intermission, go to a field. A green field full of pastures, beauty, the birds are singing, the water is flowing, gentle music in the background. Thank you, Industrial Revolution, for preventing us from living like this. Now, the Wasteland plotline is a lot longer than the Vault plotline, so I will be moving at a much faster pace to prevent this video reaching 3 hours. I'll leave it to the actual lore experts and people who enjoy making long videos to talk about every single issue, because, let's be honest here, I don't want to do a really long video and you don't come to me for really long and detailed videos. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there's already comments in the comments section complaining about a long video talking about a long show. I wonder how that could happen. So, let's get into the Wasteland plotline, shall we? Alright, let's go. We can't expect God to do all the work after all. I'll do my best to not get angry too quickly. After Lucy leaves the vault, we get a scene where— you son of a bitch! Anyway, we get a bunch of recruits beating up on another recruit at some sort of army base. It's a Brotherhood of Steel base, by the way. Because of course it is, I'll talk about that in just a second. Beating up on Maximus, another important character in this show. Why? I'm not exactly sure, I guess they found out he's black or something. We then get to see the set for the base of the Brotherhood of Steel. There's 2 flags, a new Brotherhood of Steel flag, which is wrong, because if this chapter chapter is on the West Coast, particularly the Southwest Coast in California, then this flag is wrong, and we see the American flag as well. From this single image alone, I can see that they've rewritten the Brotherhood of Steel yet again from what they originally were. To give a bit of context for anyone who might not know the Brotherhood of Steel, basically they're a group that hoards pre-war technology to protect humanity from themselves. Ooh. They're infamously isolationist and are most certainly not patriotic like this. I mean, they're so isolationist that they call you outsider and wastelander and shit like that. Basically, the idea with the faction is that they were a faction that was originally supposed to be trying to do the right thing, but as a result of their isolationism and the fact that their doctrine is inherently dated, they struggle to expand and grow smaller and smaller by the day, down to the point where in Fallout 2 they're barely there. The faction is basically you trying to do the right thing so hard that you effectively become what you've tried to destroy. The Brotherhood of Steel also has different chapters, and each chapter, which is in different locations, has different flags. The flag we see in this video? Yeah, that's the flag of the East Coast, literally on the other side of the continent, so what is it doing here? I don't know. But they're most certainly not patriotic. Not that the writers at Bethesda and of this show would know that, because they keep trying to rewrite them every single time they show up, to the point where they were basically unrecognizable in Fallout 4 and onwards. Anyway, back to the show. The Brotherhood recruits, which include outsiders, strangely enough, are having a lesson, and we can see that Maximus doesn't even know what a circuit board is. They get interrupted by the Pridwin from Fallout 4 showing up. What is it doing here? I don't know. I guess a fucking blimp can just survive crossing the fucking continent of America. Oh, are you confused as to why I called it the Pridwin? Well then you, my dear NPC, need to get your software update, because when this show first came out and was teased, a lot of people were saying it was another name. And one defense I saw was that, of course it's not the Pridwin, and then when people figured this out, that it says Pridwin on the side of it, suddenly the narrative shifted to, of course it's the Pridwin. Nobody ever said it was anything other than the Pridwin. What are you, a fucking idiot or something? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Fallout wiki even had to change it at some point. That's how goofy and rabid the defenses were. A bunch of T-60 power armor models show up, coming outside of the Pridwin. The T-60 is a pre-war model according to Bethesda, but is not a pre-war model according to everyone other than Bethesda. It was just introduced in Fallout 4 because they wanted cool stuff for the trailer footage. And it has since fucked the lore of the power armor, but whatever, I guess. I suppose the Brotherhood of Steel just isn't advanced enough to develop their own suit of power armor, even though they're one of 2 factions that were possibly capable of doing such a thing. Maximus and his transgender friend Dane, who everyone outside of the show incorrectly calls a she for some reason, go to where a lot of the models are stored, and they're very impressed by the fact that they are T-60s, a model that they don't see very frequently. If you're wondering why I pointed out the fact that Dane is transgender, well then just wait a bit. Anyway, while they're admiring the power armor, Maximus gets a flashback to— Wait, what the fuck is this? Oh my goodness. Kid in a fridge. Maximus survived a nuclear blast by hiding in a fridge with an open back, and we get a flashback to that. Now, I promise that we're going to move at a faster pace here, but I just have to point this out for anyone who might not know. In Fallout 4, there is a quest where you get to save a kid that was trapped in a fridge for 200 years, and is downright one of the stupidest quests in that game. No, it's not just stupid, it's downright infamous. Because it was with Kid in a Fridge that people started noticing the fact that Bethesda just wants to introduce things because they think it might be funny. And as such, even defenders of Fallout 4 tend to be prone to criticizing Kid in a Fridge. And people who don't like Fallout 4 outright despise the quest, because it fucks with a lot of pre-established lore, believe it or not. I won't get into why here, but just stick with me. Because there is no way, and I do mean absolutely no way, that Bethesda and the writers didn't know the reputation that Kid in a Fridge has. So the inclusion of Kid in a Fridge in this show is evidence as to the fact that they just want to insult the old fans of the franchise. And if you think I'm reading too much into it, well then, here's the second counting gag. Because this isn't the last time we'll be seeing Kid in a Fridge. Because once is a coincidence, twice is a pattern, more times is an insult. Anyway, Dane got promoted to being the squire of one of the knights. I don't know how this is a promotion because squires are kids in the Brotherhood of Steel, but alas. And Maximus is really jealous of this, to the point where he has a tard rage. cut to the next day, we get a scene in the barracks of where one guy is jacking off next to Maximus. That's relevant, believe it or not. And Dane, Maximus's only friend, gets wounded while putting on his boots because someone apparently put a razor blade in the boot. Despite Dane being probably the only person in base Maximus actually likes, everybody immediately suspects Maximus for some reason, and they take him away for interrogation. We get another kid in a fridge flashback, the second in the span of 5 minutes, by the way, and who I presume is the head scribe interrogates him. Maximus says he's innocent, but that he wanted it to happen because he was jealous. So, the head scribe, despite having no reason to believe him, and despite the fact that he just saw that one of his recruits admitted to wanting another recruit injured, out of jealousy that is, decides to promote him instead, and Maximus gets branded as the official squire of Knight Titus. We then find out that they are going out on a mission because an Enclave scientist, what the hell are they doing here, defected from the Enclave and is carrying a very special artifact that the Brotherhood really wants. And before they head out, we get a scene where it seems like the writers have no idea what the Brotherhood even is because this looks downright religious, and the Brotherhood is not religious. It would have been neat in isolation in another franchise, but in the context of Fallout, it's just off-putting. Moving on to episode 2, titled The Target, we get a fuck you. We get a fucking oldie song, because of course we do. And we see that an Enclave scientist is training his dog and working on something else. He injects himself with something, possibly the mysterious artifact we heard about in episode 1, and gets discovered. Discovered for doing what exactly, you might be asking? Is it working on this very strange artifact? No, for having a dog. Because Enclave equals evil, and they kill any dogs that don't pass their tests. Is the Enclave evil in Fallout 2? Yes. Are they doing this in Fallout 2? No. Why are they behaving like this? I don't fucking know. But seeing his master get attacked, the dog comes in and murders the person who discovered him. Not before the alarm is raised, however, so the scientist and the dog try to escape in what is probably the worst escape scene I've ever seen. Why is it the worst escape scene I've ever seen? Well, for one, he just walks out and nobody questions it. But the most egregious part is when he's walking up and a turret comes out of the ground, and the turret, well, fucking see it for yourself. Yes, because apparently you can lightly jog away from a turret firing 100 rounds a second. I mean, for fuck's sake, he has to actively hold the dog back. And they're playing tense music as if we're supposed to take something like this seriously. He's not 5 to 10 meters away from that damn turret. This scene could have been fixed if he started running before the turret even came out fully, and managed to duck away at the last second past the corner. But no, he just walks past the turret. We then cut to Lucy, and god damn it, can this show not help itself, who's patrolling the desolate wasteland to the tune of happy-go-lucky music because that's the only thing this show has, and after not finding much, decides to make a fire and goes to bed. Not for long though, because she gets attacked by a mutated radroach. Not for long, however, because she then gets saved by a dog, and how the fuck did he get here? Boy, it sure is convenient that the Enclave scientist just so happened to be in the exact same house that she decided to make camp next to, isn't it? He also seems to know who she is, and I know that it's hinting at the fact that the Enclave and VTEC are linked, but it's just a little strange that he knows a bit more than he should. Other than that, from the point that the oldie music stops, this might actually be one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. It's competent, the music is great, the audio balancing is fantastic, just as the shots are. Fucking brilliant. I wish this show had more of these. I'm gonna get angry really quickly after this, aren't I? Yes, I am, because we're back to the Brotherhood of Steel, because we're definitely not sick of them after having them be the focal point of every single goddamn game except for New Vegas. Yay! Anyway, Knight Titus is being an asshole to Maximus and decides to stop the mission because he's bored and wants to shoot something, and the pilot just agrees with this and drops them off in some place somewhere. Conveniently, the exact place the very scientist they're looking for is. Or was, because by the time they get there, there's nobody to be found. They go into a cave because the guy who wanted to shoot something is too scared to shoot something and sends Maximus forward, but the bear just teleports behind Knight Titus. They fight for a second, by which point you think a cool fight scene is actually going to unravel, but Knight Titus just runs away like a bitch, screaming, oh fuck, trips, bangs his head on a rock, which is enough to put him at death's door somehow, and we can see that the Yaogwai, the bear, is able to leave deep scratches in the armor, so Maximus kills the Yaogwai with one single gunshot, by the way. And And as he goes to save Knight Titus starts just randomly insulting Maximus and saying they're gonna kill him. Them being the Brotherhood higher-ups for not having defended Knight Titus immediately. Why didn't Knight Titus wait 5 seconds for Maximus to inject him with a stim pack? I don't know. But this leads, quite understandably, to Maximus just letting Knight Titus die. And just as a reminder, Knight Titus dies because he bonked his head on a rock with power armor, and because the bear was biting into his helmet, which doesn't even connect to his head. Don't ask me how that makes him die, but whatever. And after we get the third kid in a fridge so far. Oh, by the way, this is one of those scenes where the background CGI is so bad that everything is out of focus. Skipping a scene where Lucy has dialogue with a generic ignorant redneck, we cut back to Maximus, who has gotten Knight Titus out of the power armor, and he gets in the power armor himself and tests it out. While he does this, he also leaves Knight Titus's stuff behind, including his machine gun and the other supplies they had. He outright teleports to a location in the desert which can be seen as being not 500 meters away from where Lucy was 5 seconds ago, tests out the strength of the power armor and finds out that it's strong enough to destroy buildings, and then intervenes in a conflict where it looks like one guy is about to get killed. He saves the guy that's about to get killed, and we get to find out the reason as to why this guy was almost killing the other dude. Was it revenge? Did that guy kill his daughter? Did he steal important supplies? Please, show. Tell us what it was.
Guy was fucking my chickens.
I really have to wonder how the fuck anybody took this show seriously. I know this show isn't supposed to be super duper serious, but it gets to a point where you can't help but roll your eyes to the point where they pop out of their sockets. And yes, this is the show introducing another character that will be relevant later. But can we take ourselves seriously for just one moment? Just 1 or 2 scenes in a row? I mean, we got a cousin fucker, now we got a chicken fucker. I mean, can you introduce someone that I can take a little bit seriously for more than one scene? Anyway, she gets to Philly, and after being mocked for being an ignorant, innocent vault dweller, she runs into the Enclave scientist who, despite knowing exactly where he was going and having a head start on her, took longer to get here than the person who has been 1 day in the wasteland and has no idea where to go. But Wiltzig, the Enclave scientist, is being hunted because the ghoul, aka Cooper Howard, was in Philly waiting for him to show up because there's a bounty on him. Oh shit, that's right, I forgot to mention Cooper the ghoul. Back in episode 1, we actually saw Cooper Howard, now a ghoul, being dug out of a grave he was kept in for an unspecified amount of time. But it's highly implied it could have been weeks or months. Just remember that. Anyway, the pawn shop lady who was making fun of Lucy just a moment ago also has a bounty she wants to cash in, so she's protecting Wiltzig. Cooper, who wants to cash in a very high bounty, shoots Wiltzig's foot off with what looks like to be an exploding bullet, although it could just be bad CGI, and pawn shop lady dares everybody in town to kill the ghoul. It's here that we get to see Cooper Howard's literal plot armor as he gets shot after shot after shot after shot inserted into his body from weapons of all varieties, from pistols to shotguns to rifles, and he barely even flinches while getting shot. And of course, because we have to establish the ghoul, Cooper Howard, whatever, as a badass, he takes out the people in the town, dozens of them, with real ease. I want you to remember this for later, but what I will say for now is that does the show just think that ghouls are zombies from The Walking Dead or something? Ghouls in Fallout are actually really easy to kill, but the type of ghoul in Fallout that isn't easy to kill are the marked men from The Divide. And no, Cooper Howard is not a marked man from The Divide because the marked men can only exist in The Divide. But yes, Cooper Howard kills almost everyone, if not outright everyone in Philly, and barely even flinches despite the fact that he got shot over 20 times. This would have actually been really cool if Cooper didn't get shot a bajillion times, drawing my attention away from the fight scene itself. That's when Maximus flies in on his power armor. Since when the fuck does power armor have jetpacks? The whole point of power armor is that they get shot and are effectively walking tanks. I don't think having fuel for jetpacks would be a very good idea. Yeah, fuck it, whatever. The show adding things because it thinks it's cool even though it makes no sense. Maximus comes in, introduces himself as Knight Titus for some reason, protects Lucy from being shot, gets shot 1,000,000 times by Cooper Howard who's trying to kill him, remember that for later, and decides to try and fight Cooper Howard. A job which would have been a whole lot easier if he hadn't forgotten all the gear left behind. Lucy asks pawn shop lady if that's a knight. I have no idea how she knows what a knight is, because when she asks this he hadn't introduced himself yet. And while the fight is going on, pawn shop lady, Wiltzig, the Enclave scientist, and Lucy go in and give the Enclave scientist, Wiltzig, a prosthetic leg which makes him bleed even harder than what he already is bleeding. This is a very gory scene, and despite this, Lucy just sits there not knowing how to react, looking looking like she's bored because the acting in this show is so great. Pawn shop lady gives Lucy coordinates and they both sneak out of Philly. All the while, Maximus is fighting Cooper Howard, but because Cooper Howard has immense levels of plot armor, the power armor that can destroy entire buildings with how strong it is can't even damage Cooper. Eventually, Maximus gets stuck on a bit of wood. Why not just use your thruster/jetpack to get out? Cooper cuts one of the tubes in Maximus's power armor's suit, and this somehow makes him go flying around uncontrolled. As for Wilczek's dog, he was left behind after being shot. Yes, remember the dog? The dog seems to be on death's door, so Cooper, to try to track where Wilczek and Lucy went, injects the dog with a stim pack, and the dog is instantly cured and is now friendly to him. Point 1, that's not how stim packs work in the games. Point 2, why the fuck is the dog friendly? Point 3, Cooper Howard waits until nighttime for some reason. If you're wondering why this scene even exists, not only is it to bastardize the already established lore and how things work in the Fallout franchise, it's also because the writers seem to believe that every Fallout story has to include a dog in it. No, really, the dog really just serves no real purpose. It's just there. And despite playing no real part in any of the story, he just keeps showing up. I know you might be saying that he's used to track certain characters, but no. And we'll see that when it's relevant. Fast forward a little bit. Lucy and Wilczek are walking across a green screen room with a desert texture on it when they have to stop. Wilczek tells Lucy that he took a cyanide pill a while ago and wants her to take his head to coordinates he's gonna mark on her Pip-Boy. How he didn't die after taking the cyanide pill or why he didn't wait before telling Lucy?
They've sent me a moron!
I don't know. This show just had to force this to happen because I guess they ran out of budget to have this character in there. Wilczek also tells her that his head will be the key to getting her father back. And then he dies, and because the acting in this show is terrible, Lucy doesn't act in disgust or dismay at the fact that she has to decapitate a body. She just does it without any reaction, and that's the end of episode 2. Credits. You're making fun of me, aren't you? Episode 3 starts off, and we see that the title is The Beginning? Wait, what? The Beginning is supposed to be the title of episode 8, not of episode 3. Did they fuck up the title cards as well? What the fuck? Only Bethesda to somehow create or be related to the creation of a show that needs a patch of all fucking things. Anyway, this episode starts off with an old world scene where Cooper Howard is at a movie set, recording a scene for an upcoming movie which we're told is going to be very popular. But he disagrees with how one of the scenes is being portrayed, so he cuts off the recording and tells the film director Emile that he's unsatisfied. Wait a minute. The character that they try really hard throughout this show to make cool is called Howard, and the movie director is called Emile, as in Todd Howard and Emile Pagliarulo. They put a minority person playing the character with a name that has Scandinavian origins as well, Emile. There's just no fucking way this is a coincidence, is there? They had self-inserts, didn't they? Well, I guess it's only fitting that the politically brainwashed film director is called Emile, referencing Emile Pagliarulo, and that the character that tries really hard to look cool, but acts in very stupid ways, as we'll see later, is called Howard. Anyways, we also get introduced to Barb, aka Barbara, the wife of Todd Howard, aka Cooper Howard, aka the Ghoul. Barbara hands a candy to Cooper which she says tastes like being touched for the first time, and because this show is this show, it ends up being absolutely disgusting. And you know what? I agree. The sexual aspects of this show are disgusting. Barbara also hands him a vault suit, which she says they made in his color. So yes, the reason why the vault suits are all blue is because they are supposed to represent Cooper Howard's character in this movie that he's playing, because of course, the only times Bethesda actually adds anything to the lore, it's the most useless and pointless thing ever. Let me guess, the thumbs up that the Vault Boy does is also gonna be Cooper Howard's idea? They wouldn't do something as petty and stupid like that to pretend that they're actually adding to the lore, would they? Nah, they wouldn't do that. Cut to the present day, and Cooper, now a ghoul, has found Wilczek's body, and follows in the trails of where Lucy headed. We see a donut shop in the background, which, if you recognize that donut shop, it's because it's right next to LA International Airport. I'll explain why I'm telling you this in just a moment, but for now, just keep in mind that it shows that this entire time she has never left LA. Also, we see Cooper Howard take some mysterious magical medicine after he starts coughing. This medicine is going to become very important later, so just keep it in the back of your mind. Plotline. We cut to Lucy and you. God damn it, can this show stop already? This song, this oldie song, is called Maybe, for those of you that don't know, and it's from Fallout 1. Or at least the use of it is a reference to Fallout 1. And you can really tell they had no idea what they were doing when they were putting in these oldies songs and using these songs such as Maybe. And what a difference a day makes back in the Vault plotline. I'll spare you the explanation to save on time, but if you're actually curious as to why I think it's so inadequate and why it's making me react in the way that it is, check out Fallout 1 and see when it's actually used. And you'll see why it's so inappropriate, especially when in comparison to the rest of that game. Anyway, after Lucy walks around for a bit, we see she makes a fireplace in front of a green screen despite being told the previous day not to do exactly that. She takes out Wiltzig's head from her bag and we see she's bizarrely nonchalant about just having a decapitated head on her lap and shoving a tracker from her Pip-Boy in it. You could make a case about how the directing is bad here, but I guess she just realized that it's CGI, so there's no real harm there. It explains why she doesn't react to gore the way she should. Cutting to the next scene, we see Maximus dragging his power armor, which is so heavy he needs a contraption and chains to do it. It's broken and he needs a replacement part, but before he can go get it, he gets contacted by the Brotherhood of Steel headquarters, and instead of just saying that Titus died, or at least making up an excuse as to why Titus died and why he isn't to blame, he pretends to be Knight Titus, effectively guaranteeing that he'll get in trouble later. The only reason as to why he actually does this is to have conflict later in the plotline and have things happen to keep the seal of an audience interested, but really this entire thing could have been solved and prevented from even happening if he had just said that Knight Titus died bravely and that he's continuing the mission until the end in honor of Knight Titus. But this is a show based on Bethesda Fallout, so expecting the characters to be smart and think about things is kind of stupid of me, I guess. But from now on, he cannot let anyone realize his true identity. He's also told via the radio he proceeds to break that they're sending him a replacement squire, which stresses out Maximus a lot because he's going to have to actively hide his identity from whoever this new squire is. He leaves the power armor and the gun that's on it behind for some reason, and enters Philly to try to find someone who can fix the part. Philly, by the way, the same place that Cooper Howard massacred people in the previous day, which is now just magically fixed to justify him actually being able to fix the part as quickly as he does. He buys the fix from somebody who looks more at home in a Mad Max movie than they do in Fallout, and has a prop duct taped to her face. He goes back to his power armor, and to the surprise of absolutely nobody, because he left power armor unguarded, we see it being ravaged by some scavengers. So he goes to fight them off, and we get another oldies song, because we didn't have enough of those already, I guess. And during the fight scene, we can see that the scavengers who overpower Maximus shove him in the power armor. They have him at their mercy, and apparently they decide that the right thing to do is to shove him up the only tool that can save his life in that very same instance. That's the convenience of this show. They had to have a fight scene for some reason, but then back him into a corner and realize that they need some way to make him get out of it. So they come up with the most convenient and dumb thing ever to justify why this character doesn't just die right then and there. This is literal plot power armor at this point. So he wins the fight, and 5 minutes or so after being told he would get a new squire via the radio, the new squire arrives via Vertibird, which is just there immediately. Because this show has no real concept of time and space, I suppose. I kid, of course. The real reason is because every single location in this show is basically right next to each other. I know the dialogue in the show implies otherwise, but if you can trace the locations they're in, let's just say the dialogue is lying to you. The new squire that Maximus is about to get is Thaddeus, one of Maximus's own bullies, but that's not before we see Maximus, who's trying to hide the fact that he's alive, runs to where the Vertibird is landing in eyesight of the very people he's trying to hide his identity from. I mean, fucking hell, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Christ on a bicycle. Thaddeus is even shown to look in the exact direction that Maximus is, and somehow nobody spots him. I'm also not sure where Brotherhood High Command knew where Maximus was, but hey, I guess they just figured it out. And before you tell me they have trackers in the power armor, well, they probably would have noticed Titus dropping off much earlier than he should have because he wanted to shoot something. Don't try that cope with me, because that doesn't get very far, because I'm actually one of the people who ended up paying attention to this show on second viewing. Anyway, they meet up with Maximus now back in the power armor, and we see Maximus in his cock explosion face enjoying Thaddeus begging for his life way too much. Thaddeus informs Maximus, who he believes to be Knight Titus, that he was told to relate a message, the message being that whoever gets the artifact from Wiltzig's head controls the Wasteland. First of all, no. Secondly, how the fuck do they know what the hell Wiltzig's artifact is? They wouldn't know its usefulness otherwise. Actually, thirdly, how the fuck are so many people aware of Wiltzig and the artifact anyway? Cooper said in the previous episode that bounties came in from, quote, all 6 agencies. Ignoring the fact that these 6 agencies just exist and they're never explained, there is no goddamn motherfucking son of a bitching, paint-huffing, chuckle-cunting way that anyone outside of the Enclave and whoever Wiltzig is going to should have any idea who Wiltzig is, much less that his head has something important in it. Much less a fucking MacGuffin that can control the Wasteland. People just know, things just happen, things just get said, despite them making no sense, and I'm honestly starting to really get sick of it. Because even in Bethesda's Fallout, Bethesda's shitty fucking iterations of Fallout, there was at least some sort of explanation, some sort of reasoning as to why characters knew the things they did and did the things they did. But here it's just because, and makes the plot feel really forced together, duct taped together even. I'm not expecting Shakespearean level writing here, I'm just expecting there to be basic justifications for why the plot needs to happen. There aren't any, the characters just know things, and the fact that this MacGuffin can control the Wasteland doesn't actually play that much of a justification later in the plot. They would have continued with the search anyway, and this is just here to add tension and adds questions as well. Cut to the next scene, we see Lucy approaching a lake that shows a sign pointing to... Wait, what the fuck does that sign say? Hollywood Boulevard Exit 12A. Hollywood Boulevard Exit 12A. Alexa, where's Hollywood Boulevard Exit 12A on a map? Oh, you son of a bitch! Okay, so in case you don't know, I'm going to break my own structure here for a second and just reveal to you that her final objective is the Griffith Observatory inside Los Angeles. She is within literal shouting distance of her objective, and I can tell you already she isn't gonna make it there in this episode. The walk from where she started off to here is actually supposed to take no longer than 6 hours, but we see that she's right next to her objective in episode 3. Episode 3 out of 8. 5 episodes of shit that wouldn't have happened if Lucy simply didn't do what she's about to do. What is she about to do? Well, Lucy is the perfect personification of the average Bethesda Fallout player. Why? Because despite knowing the fact that there are mutant creatures roaming the wasteland and being faced with a giant lake, i.e. a giant obstacle, instead of going around it, she looks at her Pip-Boy that's telling her to go forward and she just walks forward. That lake, by the way, is later revealed to be radioactive, and despite this, the Geiger counter on her Pip-Boy is just not going off. And to the surprise of nobody, because this show just needs things to happen and didn't really think through the fact that forcing in recognizable locations just keeps putting them against a wall, them being the writers, to the surprise of nobody, she gets attacked by a Gulper mutant, an East Coast Gulper mutant, which is just here, by the way, that teleports behind her and steals the head of the scientist Wiltzig. And then, because, again, this show just needs things to happen because it has a checklist of things it wants to have take place, Cooper Howard, the ghoul, which is at least half a day behind her, catches up to her by teleporting behind her and holds Lucy hostage. A very specific set of convenient events that just needed to happen so this show can explain why it has 8 episodes and not 3. Is the convenience over? No, it isn't, because Cooper holds Lucy hostage and uses her as bait to make sure the Gulper comes back, and it does, but instead of shooting it right there and then with this super powerful pistol, he decides it's actually a better idea to get up close to it and just pokes it with a stick. That's right, the character that has 220 years of experience surviving the wasteland decides to, instead of shooting its target, just pokes it with a fucking stick, and of course this leads to Cooper falling off, and his magical medicine from earlier gets broken, and the Gulper then escapes. What is this magical medicine? We don't know, but we know that it being broken concerns Cooper very much, and instead of just deciding to try to get the Gulper again, he just walks away, taking Lucy with him. This is the character that people keep telling me is the coolest thing and best thing about the show? Really? The one character in this show that has a reason to not be a complete fucking retard and he does something as stupid as this? Is all you need to entertain audiences nowadays to have a character with a cowboy hat and a cool accent? Oh wait, what am I talking about? He's Cooper Howard, related to Todd Howard, I guess. That explains why he can leave an impression but really just does things that make no sense. Fast forward to, where the fuck even are they? Maximus and Thaddeus. We can see Maximus is bullying Thaddeus by making him climb up trees and then getting chuckles when he falls. Because nuance isn't something that was invented at Amazon Studios yet, they find Wiltzig's body, hold up a piece of paper to where his head should be, and decide that yes, this is the person that they're looking for based on this evidence. I'm not even gonna question it anymore. I guess this was an attempt at humor that landed with the weight of a feather. To decide on where they should go next, Thaddeus pulls out a radiation tracker to track the fuck? Wait, what? You two idiots are in the nuclear post-apocalyptic wasteland. There should be radiation everywhere. What the fuck is this item even for? We're told that it tracks radiation, but really it should be useless because there's radiation everywhere. Given the context of the entire world they're in, this item should be absolutely useless and should have never been invented. Given how tracking radiation when everything around you is irradiated is kind of pointless. But Maximus finds footprints on the ground, so they decide to follow that. Eventually taking a break for a bit of character development, this is actually a pretty decent scene. We get to see that the reason that Thaddeus joined up with the bullying of Maximus was just because he didn't want to be the guy who was bullied anymore. And Maximus seems to legitimately reconsider his position. This is actually a really decent scene. I found myself very interested. I wonder where they're going with this. I want to see more character develop. Okay, we're just going to the next scene. Okay, alright, never mind. Despite having found footprints earlier, they're now back to following the radiation tracker, and we see that the radiation tracker has led them to the very same lake Lucy was in. The Gulper attacks them, and Maximus, who left the machine gun behind way off in episode 2, decides to try to protect Thaddeus with his pistol. Would have been really convenient if they had just stepped out of the water, or if Maximus hadn't left the machine gun behind. Never mind, I guess. Thaddeus just now has a machine gun, which instead of shooting with regular bullets, he just uses to shoot a harpoon at it, which pisses off the Gulper, and Thaddeus is almost swallowed up, and instead of an actual cool fight scene, we get another oldie song where the Gulper and Maximus play tug of war, and this somehow kills the Gulper. Was this supposed to be intense? Was this supposed to be funny? I legitimately don't know anymore. Anyway, they get the head back from the Gulper, and they celebrate. And now the dog that Cooper Howard had is just here, and is now tagging along with Maximus and Thaddeus, I guess. That would have been a nice relaxation moment after a fight scene, which the show would have deserved if it didn't have this fiend-like addiction to making jokes and a mockery out of anything tense. Cut to the next scene. Cooper Howard is enjoying torturing Lucy by drinking water in front of her while she's severely dehydrated. Why is he torturing her? Why is he enjoying doing it so much? I don't know. The wasteland must have changed him. Ooh, that's totally why people call him the Ghoul and not Cooper Howard. Yeah, guys. He's not the good guy from before the war. Cut back to another pre-war scene. We see that Cooper Howard is taking a photo shoot in his vault suit for VTEC. He then...
What if I were to do like a thumbs up? Go for it, Coop.
You son of a bitch, they actually did it, didn't they? They gave a backstory to the VTEC boy having his thumbs up. The most pointless addition to the lore I think I have ever seen, and kind of kills the mystique there was behind VTEC and its imagery. Every Fallout player knows that VTEC is evil, and having some mystique around them helps to reinforce that fact, and the suspicion at any imagery related to VTEC and the vaults. But by adding backstory to it, they just fucked it. It's not the end of the world, mind you, but it's just another fuck you to people who actually care about the aesthetic of Fallout, and the various impressions that that very same aesthetic contributes to. And with that, that's the end of episode 3. Yes, all of that was episode 3. Moving on to episode 4, titled I don't know what it's titled, because after they fucked up the title card in episode 3, they removed title cards from every episode afterwards. Because instead of fixing the issue that they very clearly noticed they had, they just removed it afterwards because they couldn't be bothered fixing it. That's the sign of a people who really care about the product that they're creating. Anyway, episode 4 starts with a son of a bitch, can you just stop? Another fucking oldie song, because of course. Cooper Howard is taking Lucy and they passed Westside Medical Clinic. I guess they just teleported to New Vegas for a second. And they find a ghoul trying to resist turning feral that Cooper Howard apparently knows. Cooper asks if he has any vials of the mysterious magical medicine, whatever it is, but the ghoul they find says no, he's all out. Seeing that his old world friend is about to die, he decides to get him calm, talking about the past, reminiscing, and shoots him in the head. A mercy kill. A really good scene, honestly, and how the fuck was Cooper able to one-tap him if Cooper, another ghoul, was tanking bullet shots earlier? Is it ever explained? Nope, it isn't. But I also have to ask, what the fuck is Cooper doing? That's right, he just decides to cannibalize his friend 5 seconds after killing him. Because you gotta do what you gotta do in the wasteland, and now I want to draw your attention away from whatever else you're doing, because I know you're watching this in the background, because it's right here that something that turns out to be very, very important is said, and that most of the people in my comment section criticizing me didn't notice. Feast your eyes and ears on this passage from the dialogue that happens.
In the Great Plague of 77, people starved, my mother included.
Ah, I see. There was a famine in which Lucy's mom died in the vault in 2277. That's a bit of character and world building, isn't there? Lucy's mom starved to death in a famine in Vault 33 in 2277. 2277. I wonder why that date is so relevant. Surely, if Lucy's mom starved to death in 2277, then she wouldn't have been coming back to life in 2278. Or 2279, or 2280, or 2282, as Todd Howard says. No, Lucy's mom starved to death in 2277 because that's when she never saw her mom again. Okay, now that we've established that, Lucy also mentions her last name, McLean, and this seems to get Cooper's attention. But it's not elaborated on in this scene, so I guess it's just something that they're building up for later. So Cooper and Lucy go back on the march, and again Cooper Howard is torturing her by drinking water in front of her while Lucy is highly dehydrated. Lucy, who's getting desperate, drinks out of a puddle of water, and we can hear her Geiger counter going absolutely bananas. It's here that we can see that directional audio isn't a thing that was invented at Amazon Studios yet, because you hear the Geiger counter at the exact same volume no matter where the camera placement is. And before you say it's just a creative decision, well, it's a bad creative decision, because all it did is make the Geiger counter noise stand out, and all it really did is remind me that the Geiger counter exists, making me wonder why it hasn't gone off at any point during her adventure, including when she's surrounded by raiders back in Vault 33. While she's drinking the water, Cooper Howard is seen to be zoning out, possibly an effect of not having taken that magical medicine that he's supposed to take for whatever reason. And Lucy takes this opportunity to try to run away from him. But Cooper Howard, because he has a cowboy hat, does the cowboy thing and throws a lasso around her, captures her again, shoves his hand in her mouth for whatever reason, and Lucy bites off her finger. To this, he responds by cutting off Lucy's finger. Now, here's the thing. When I saw this, I innocently wondered to myself how the hell these characters are gonna cope with not having their fingers. Cooper Howard just lost his trigger finger, so how the hell is he going to shoot as he's been shooting this entire time? And how is Lucy gonna cope with it? Well, for starters, she barely reacts to having her finger cut off right in front of her. Another sign that the direction is shit, but even still, a real question I have, which I will come back to momentarily, because I have to ask, what the fuck is this ruined city? Where the fuck even are they? Are these supposed to be the ruins of LA still? I suppose so, but isn't LA supposed to be the boneyard? You know, an entire city within the New California Republic? You know, that giant country-sized faction in the Fallout universe. In fact, the boneyard is the industrial hub of the New California Republic. Why haven't we seen any New California Republic imagery so far? Where the fuck are the New Californians? I don't know. Why does the city look like it has been uninhabited pretty much for 200 years? All of these questions floating around in my mind while I was watching the show. After all this happens, they eventually get to a supermarket called the Super Duper Mart, where an exchange is going to happen. Cooper offers an exchange, Lucy, for 2 months of vials. What are the vials for? Well, we're about to find out. So Cooper sends Lucy in, and passes out right there due to not having the medication. Really, I wonder what this medication is. Is it something very specific for Cooper, or what? Well, it's important enough for him to turn around away from his objective and come to sell Lucy for it. Wait just a second. Didn't Cooper's friend also say he had no vials, and that he was all out and down on his luck? Do the vials have something to do with the... No, that can't be it. Anyway, she enters the supermarket and finds a Mr. Handy who's being awfully polite to her and offers to fix her finger. Oh, so they can have a Mr. Handy but not a fucking robo-brain? Okay, no, not a big deal. The Mr. Handy reattaches a rotting finger to her hand, which makes me wonder how the hell she didn't just get sepsis and die. But of course, this show just had to instantly fix the thing it established a moment ago. She just doesn't get sepsis and gets a working finger that's rotted but still works somehow. What was the point of trying to shock the audience if you were gonna give her back her finger in like 5 minutes time? I don't know, but then the Mr. Handy says, in a way that actually did get a chuckle out of me, that he's going to harvest her organs. It's stupid given how he just gave her a finger, so why are you helping her if you're just gonna harvest her organs anyway? But, you know, it did get a slight chuckle out of me, so given how depressed this show has made me be, I'll excuse the stupidity for once and let it go purely on the fact that it provided 1 second of entertainment. So she gets gets tranquilized and wrapped up in a gurney and taken to the two leaders of this supermarket operation that they have going on here. And we see that it's two bumblefuck retards. Oh, great, another bumblefuck patrol just sitting there eating ramen noodles, and they ask what the trade was. The robot, who we learn is called Snip Snip, informs them that the trade is 60 vials, aka 2 months of supply of vials. Okay, so 60 vials is 2 months worth of supply, so Cooper Howard has to take this mystery medicine once every day. Let's just keep that in mind for a moment. Anyway, Lucy is about to have her organs harvested when she manages to break free and fight back, using a defibrillator that was there to disable Snip Snip. After disabling the robot, she proceeds to fix it somehow, only with medical gear, and shoves a Braxo cleaner in the robot's gun. Or syringe thrower, or whatever the fuck. She holds the two bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol the sequel hostage and tells them to release all of the captives that they had, which seems to be a bunch of ghouls. First, they comply and release a bunch of non-feral ghouls, but Lucy, apparently not understanding, forces them to release even the feral ones. One of the bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol the sequel tries to explain this to her, but Lucy doesn't listen, and he doesn't even try to explain it to her. In any meaningful capacity right after, that is. To the surprise of a whole 0 people, the feral ghouls attack. The two bumblefucks from Bumblefuck Patrol the sequel start taking down the feral ghouls with one-taps. Again, these ghouls die really easily. So yes, I guess I was right when I said Cooper Howard has literal plot armor. The ghouls also, I can't help but notice, look more like the Walking Dead zombies than they do actual ghouls. I guess they ran out of props to use and went next door to ask for some leftovers. And yes, they also do behave like zombies. They're just trying to eat whoever they attack. That's not how ghouls are supposed to behave, but okay. So Lucy, after realizing what turning feral means, kills the last one, goes outside and says,
"You don't get these. You turn into one of those.
What was that?
You don't get these. You turn into one of those."
You goddamn motherfucker. Didn't retcon any lore. 10 out of 10 show, faithful to the franchise, and yet it just retconned the existence of every single ghoul in the games and the show itself. So let me get this straight. If Cooper Howard and every other ghoul does not take one of these per day, aka a 2-month supply as we can see, because a 2-month supply is 60, then how the fuck does any ghoul in Fallout still exist? Oh, did the scientists just have a magical serum before the war to fix a problem that nobody should fucking have because ghouls are something that happened after the Great War? Good fucking job, show writers, and good fucking job to every single troglodyte who claims to have liked this show and that it has a good plot and that it didn't break any lore for defending this, because now every single ghoul in Fallout is outright impossible. Completely ignoring the question of who the fuck manufactures these. Wasn't Cooper Howard said to be in episode 1 buried for weeks if not months in a coffin under the ground? What, are they just bringing him back up every single day to feed him these ghoul vials? Where the fuck did these ghoul vials even come from? I don't know. I don't fucking know. They've never been in any of the previous games. And in case you don't know, ghouls in Fallout go feral when their brain stops producing healthier cells. So the writers of the show and the dipshits at Bethesda who signed off on this just invented a cure for literal brain rot and made every single ghoul in the Fallout franchise be outright impossible. If you came to me in my comment sections and told me that this is one of those shows that is faithful to the franchise, doesn't break any lore, or doesn't break most lore, go fuck yourself. I tell you to go fuck yourself with a plasma rifle from Fallout, but this show doesn't have any, so I can't get any. Good fucking god, not only has this show been blasting our ears with unnecessary oldie music, retconning and ripping things off left, right, and center, it just wrote itself into a corner and doesn't even realize it, and also retcon that as well. Cooper Howard did not take his medicine for half a day, and he's passing out. Are you telling me that when the bombs dropped, people just came up with this magic serum in 12 hours? No, of course that's not what you're telling me, because the writers didn't think of it. Some of the best characters in Fallout, right? Raul Terradas from Fallout New Vegas, for example, cannot exist because of this serum. You know who else can't exist because of this serum? Fucking kid in a fridge! Because in Fallout 4, the kid only survived 200 years in a fridge because he turned into a ghoul. At least that was the excuse. So they just retconned themselves. Fuck this show, fuck everyone involved in it, and fuck everyone who defended it on the basis of let them cook. If you legitimately enjoyed this show, fine. But if you think the show has good writing, you're a fucking idiot, and I don't care what you think about me after that. Because even in isolation, this is absolutely retarded. Seriously, how did nobody involved in this show notice that they kept showing that Cooper Howard is pre-war and then not question how the fuck he survived up until this day if he's pre-war, while needing a vial a day to survive? Oh, come on, we're almost done with this episode. Let's just power through so we can have another intermission. Lucy, despite having been outright tortured by the ghoul, plays the moral character, doesn't kill him, gives him some of the vials, and the ghoul, Cooper Howard, then goes inside, takes a bunch of vials at the same time, sees his movie playing on the television in case the fucking idiots who defend this show haven't realized who he is, and the episode ends. Thank God. This show is not only made by stupid people for stupid people, but it also thinks that you're a stupid person. First, the flashbacks to bodies that they saw within the same episode back in the vault plotline in episode 4, in case you forgot, and now this. I guess that's why they keep having all these haha funny sex jokes. The showrunners must think that you, the viewer, are literally Beavis and Butthead from that one meme.
We're gonna be talking about the penis! We'll be talking about the vagina! Do you think that's funny, Butthead? Do you find it amusing that we'll be talking about the testicles?
Now we get to episode 5, the episode where nothing happens. It's a filler episode, and no, I'm not kidding, nothing of substance happens. You see, I actually finished watching this show long before a lot of other people did. I wasn't anywhere near the first in my group to actually watch it, far from it, but here's the issue. When I watched it, I wanted to comment on it to other people, and I kept giving them wrong information about what events happened in which episode. Made me look like a real moron, but I didn't actually understand what was happening until I rewatched this for the review. And that's when I realized why. Because this episode is so filler and so forgettable that I associated events that happened in episode 4 to episode 5 and events that happened in episode 5 to episode 6. So this is good news for the people who are upset at the fact that this review is getting kind of long. Because I can legitimately speedrun reviewing this entire episode at the snap of my fingers, and you're not gonna miss anything of substance. Check this out. Maximus and Titus teleported back to the city where they're celebrating their victory. Maximus, despite starting to like Titus, brands him, scarring him for life quite literally, and then reveals himself to Thaddeus, and then starts going on a tard rage when Thaddeus doesn't actually agree with lying to the entire Brotherhood. Because that's a hero main character, he has a villain arc. Thaddeus disarms Maximus by removing the fusion core somehow, gets his foot destroyed, and limps away with the head. Maximus is gonna die because he's now stranded inside the power armor, which doesn't open for some reason, and is about to be eaten by radroaches when Lucy teleports to him, despite following the radiation signature of the head, meaning that she should go in the opposite direction, saves his ass, and then Maximus saves her when she gets radiation sickness. Later, they're talking about their past experiences when Lucy says she thought the projector in her vault was the sun until she was 6, meaning that she was in the vault by the age of 6. Just keep that in mind. They come across 2 fiends on a bridge because I guess the fiends factions just teleported from the Mojave Desert to Los Angeles, California, and Maximus gets wounded. While this happened, there was an oldie song playing. God, how quick that was? How far do you think I'm in the episode? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? No, 30 minutes. Yes, that's right. I just described 30 minutes of an episode in less than 60 seconds. And I can guarantee you, you lost absolutely nothing of value in this. Unless listening to oldie songs or listening to them babble on about shit that is never brought up again and does not change their characters is relevant to you, nothing was lost. I really just want to reinforce that. Go to the timestamps below and see how long it took me to cover episodes 3 and 4 and then compare it to right now. But it's gonna get a whole lot worse because Maximus takes her to where a bomb crater is and we see... What? We see Shady Sands? Shady fucking Sands in Los Angeles, California. Editor, put a map of the NCR on screen, please. Are you telling me that Shady Sands not only got nuked out of existence, it also got its location retconned, and despite being a city built from scratch, it actually is now just a community within Los Angeles, California? Los Angeles, California, by the way, which is the LA Boneyard? That's 3 spits in the face of Fallout fans, by the way. 4 games where the NCR is either a major player or at least quite relevant to some characters. And if you're doubting what the 4th game is, you really are a Bethesda fan because you really don't pay attention to what you play. A city built from scratch, now retconned out of its location, existence, and retcons another city in the meantime. The backstory to it all gone. Why? I don't know yet. The show hasn't told me. I don't know when this happened. I don't know how it happened other than the fact that it included a nuke. I don't know why this happened, but I just know I'm starting to notice a whole whole lot of fucking coincidences in this show that just so happen to destroy literally everything that isn't associated with things that Bethesda specifically created for Fallout. I'm starting to use my basic human capability of pattern recognition. But you know, this is just one thing in a fucking ocean of shit. I'm not going to start associating things and reaching conclusions now, am I? I don't have any information as to how Shady Sands got nuked and when. It couldn't possibly be that they're maliciously trying to retcon previous games now, is it? It's just a coincidence that they retconned vaults, ghouls, vault experiments, and all those other things. No, it's just a coincidence. Nah. It's just a coincidence. Oh, by the way, kid in a fridge again. Add that to the counter. Anyway, Shady Sands is now in the LA Boneyard, and while Lucy and Maximus are walking around, they just find an intact VTEC office while Maximus is bleeding out from an injury he got while fighting the fiends. And no, the fight scene wasn't worth it and could have been avoided. You didn't miss anything. And in case you haven't noticed, by the way, they left Maximus's power armor behind. While walking through this practically pristine VTEC office, they fall in a trap door, and when they wake up, we can see that they're now in a vault. End credit sequence. Why am I mentioning the end credit sequence? Because it presents us with this image, and I want you to keep this image in mind for the next episode. But before we get to the next episode, I want to point something out, and that is that as of me saying this right now, it's been a whole 5 minutes. In exactly 5 minutes, including the introduction, I just described every single event in the Wasteland Plotline in an episode that takes 45 minutes. Now, this also includes the events of the Underground Plotline, which I didn't mention here, so I'm being a little bit fallacious, but that's also the episode where Betty gets promoted to Overseer, and we get 2 reuses of the same oldies song, and an edit of people on the toilet and people shoving packets of ice down their trousers, so in and of itself being an episode I could have described in 5 minutes or less, maybe under 10, but still. The Wasteland Plotline was the focus of this episode, and I described it in 5 whole minutes. So there you go, I just saved you from watching that piece of shit. Alright, now we get to one of the big ones, but before we actually start off with it, I want to inform you of something, and that is, this is that one episode. You know the one I'm talking about. And to address some of the things that this show presents to us, I'm going to have to break a little bit of my structure and mention some things that get revealed in episode 8. I won't reveal everything that happens in episode 8, far from it, but if I leave everything to the end, then it will become a clusterfuck then. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get to this episode. We start with an old world scene where Cooper Howard is demonstrating some of the vaults for an advertisement when he meets... Hold on, I just noticed this while editing it at the end, but have you noticed that the black bars shift location while they're recording the actual advertisement compared to the normal show? Yeah, you see those black bars at the bottom? They shift to the side and the black bars at the bottom disappear. It's really off-putting now that I've noticed it, and I really can't unsee it. Do you see it as well? Anyway, he's doing all that when he meets Bud. Yes, Bud, the robo-brain from episode 8 in the Vault plotline. During this conversation, we get some elaboration on Cooper's time in the army. And that is in the sense that he saw a lot of people die due to a defect in the T-45 power armor that makes them vulnerable to frontal shots at very specific angles. He saw a lot of people die, so he isn't interested in Bud's salesmanship. I could make a comment here about how the fuck is a defect so obvious allowed to even serve in the US Army, since this defect in particular breaks the entire point of using power armor in the first place, but I'm not going to. I'll leave it to army lunatics to talk about that. Later, at a party, Cooper's having a conversation with an actor that everybody except me recognizes, but I do recognize his voice from that Mr. Handy back at the Super Duper Mart. I'll just call him Mr. Famous. So Mr. Famous and Cooper are having a conversation about communist infiltration in Hollywood. Ironic, I know. Given how not only is that absolutely true in real life, well, it's also true of this show. But I haven't gotten to that yet, and Mr. Famous says that the end of the world is a product. How exactly is the end of the world a product? I'm not sure, given how the end of the world means the end of consumerism. Mass consumerism, modern consumerism, that is. We get a slight hint that Cooper isn't exactly happy about this, but he doesn't show it. Cut back to the modern day when Cooper seems to be passed out on the floor of the Super Duper Mart, when some guys who present themselves as being the government, yes, government, knock him out and take him to some location, because I guess the writers couldn't figure out a way to keep Cooper in the story. Oh, you think I'm exaggerating? No, I'm not. These guys literally only exist to give Cooper a reason to join back with the main gang. Not yet, because we cut back to Lucy and Maximus in the vault, Vault 4. They're told that they're gonna have to be put in isolation for a little bit before they can actually be let into the vault next to the other vault dwellers, and that they'll have to wait, but not before the people in Vault 4 say that they found Maximus's power armor and are bringing it over. How did they find Maximus's power armor? How are they bringing it over? It's never explained. I guess they just read the script and figured out that Maximus is gonna need his power armor for something in this vault. So they opened up the game console, gave themselves max strength, and teleported it over here. It's here where possibly one of the cringiest segments of dialogue in this entire show takes place. I'm gonna edit it slightly so I don't get this video hijacked by people who want to put 900 ads on it, but just for the sake of context, Lucy asks out of nowhere, "Do you want to have sex?" And this is what follows.
You mean use my cock?
Yeah.
I don't know, that weird thing could happen.
What?
Well, it's just for some guys, not me. But for some guys, you know, when they make it move, it gets all big and hard like a big pimple and then it pops. And they say it could happen to anybody, but it's gross.
Remember back when I was talking about the start of the Wasteland plotline and I mentioned that Maximus had a guy jacking off in the barracks next to him? Well, here's why it's relevant. You see, I definitely planned out this video very well. Maximus is an adult male surrounded by other adult males who, according to the show, are comfortable enough with jacking off right next to him in the barracks. Yet, because this show was written by children, don't mean to offend any actual children in the audience, he seems to think that getting an erection is basically having a pimple pop. Did I say basically? No, I mean literally. I cannot believe that I have gotten to the point where I'm talking about a character thinking that an erection is like a pimple popping. In the Fallout franchise, the very same franchise where an elite army soldier gets raped by a degenerate, crazed maniac fiend, you not only need to acknowledge that this happened, but need to bring out revenge, acknowledging that a lot of people are suffering as a result of these actions, and then help that person get past the trauma. The franchise that gave us that is now giving us primary school levels of sex jokes, because it just can't help itself and thinks that everybody in the audience, writers included, are fucking idiots, who will roll on the floor laughing every time something sexual is brought up. And because this show is this show and this show is the worst, it still manages to be inconsistent within itself because Maximus should at least have an idea of what an erection is. So great, we have a bunch of needless sex humor that doesn't land for anybody except for the mentally incapacitated, and I still think that even for the mentally incapacitated it wouldn't be funny, and still manages to not be consistent within itself, despite having such a great focus on it. It's not funny, it's not quirky, it's not smart, it's just embarrassing. After this, we get to see the CGI budget ran out, and by that I mean that Lucy and Maximus are surrounded by a bunch of vault dwellers now, and a lot of them turn out to be mutants. What type of mutants? Super mutants, ghouls, deathclaws, a guy that turned into a tree? No, it's just people with extra noses on their heads, and the show tries to take itself seriously here with music. As if we're supposed to be alarmed by this. I was just embarrassed to look at it. It was shamefully bad. The most creative mutant that they have among them is a guy with one eye, that's it, who mentions that they don't go into level 12 of the vault. They had so many mutants from the Fallout franchise they could have taken inspiration from, so goddamn many, and they took all of that, fucked it, burned it, threw it out the window, and just put a nose on a guy's forehead. Oh, and a lot of those vault dwellers turn out to be refugees from Shady Sands, but I won't talk about them yet, those motherfucking pieces of shit, because now it's time for another old world scene. Cooper and Barbara are in a bathtub, and all this scene really does is show us Barbara is really tribal and dedicated to her job, and also that they introduced Pip-Boys, the same Pip-Boys that the Vault Dwellers are using, because I guess that the old Model 2000 Pip-Boy has just been retconned now. No, really, that's all this scene serves for. It's just Barbara is a corporate, and then it ends. Later, Cooper Howard is at a bar talking to a nameless rando, and eventually the conversation about VTEC, the people who came up with the vaults, is brought up. After the typical spiel of capitalism evil, the nameless rando mentions that Cooper Howard should go listen to one of the speeches by Moldaver, because she talks a lot about these things and discusses things that are taboo and that can't be mentioned in society. For one, how the fuck is Moldaver alive a whole 200 fucking years after this scene? Did she find a way to cryogenically freeze herself? Is she a ghoul without the burned skin or something? I don't fucking know. But for two, go figure that the badass girl boss is not only a badass in the Wasteland, but also has a history of fighting the power before the war. At first, Cooper Howard is not convinced, but after talking with his wife Barbara for a little bit about the job that she has, he's convinced, and is eventually going to try to go listen to one of Moldaver's speeches to see what it's all about. Back at the vault, Maximus is being pampered by the vault dwellers to the tune of an oldies song, because of course he is. Given a robe, running water, and oysters which exist for some reason. And this is enough to convince him to start loving the vault. Meanwhile, Lucy is exploring the vault and sees it. Wait, what am I looking at? What the fuck am I looking? Freeze frame! Pause right there. Oh boy, the test of literacy literacy, the test of the literacy that people that complain about others not having media literacy don't pass for themselves. The chalkboard scene. Oh boy, I was waiting for this one. Let me give you a little bit of context. Let me give you a little bit of media literacy, if you will. I'm gonna give a slight, and by slight I mean major, but I don't give a fuck spoiler about this. But it was Hank who nuked Shady Sands when his wife Rose found out about civilization above ground. If you have a memory superior to that of a fish, you'll remember a lot of the details I've been telling you to remember this entire time. And if you do, great. If you don't, it goes like this. Let me tell you the timeline. This is what happened. Rose figures out that there is civilization above ground. Having figured this out, she takes her daughter, Lucy, above ground where they can live in not Shady Sands happily ever after away from the vault. But Hank, being part of VTEC, does not like this at all. So, much like he did when he got elected, he manufactured a crisis to explain why he, Rose, and Lucy weren't there. That one being the famine, caused by a plague, the Great Plague of 77 as mentioned by Lucy. While Lucy is above ground, she sees the sun. Not long after, Hank arrives, takes Lucy back, and to stop any threat to his Vault Society and VTEC plan, he gets a nuke somehow. I guess he just opened the console and added that to his inventory, and nukes Shady Sands out of existence. When returning to the vault with Lucy, he comes up with the excuse as to why Rose is no longer there, saying that she starved in the famine caused by the Great Plague of 77. And to ensure that Lucy doesn't remember that she actually saw the sun, he tells her about the vault projector, and because she is just 6 at this point, she is told that what she actually saw wasn't the sun, but just the vault projector, so she doesn't realize she was in the outside world or remember it later. All of this was done with the aid of Betty, another VTEC employee who, while Hank was gone, was keeping an eye on things and keeping the narrative straight, coming up with excuses as to why Hank was not there while he was looking for Lucy. Moreover, according to the library ledger in the school in Not Shady Sands, we can see that logs stopped being recorded in 2276, which, although not entirely major, backs up the notion that something happened that stopped logs being recorded in 2276 or 2277. Whoever drew this graph was being very careful about the dates and the history of Shady Sands, because every single date in it is correct. This is all that the show has been telling us and reinforcing. So now I have one tiny, very simple questions and just a tiny doubt that I want to have answered. And that question is, and please be gentle with, how the fuck does nobody realize this is intentional retconning of Fallout New Vegas? Well, I say nobody, I mean the actual people who play Fallout and still defend this show. Of course, there's the critics, but anyone who criticizes this show is apparently a media and history illiterate, completely ignoring the irony in that statement. Other than the fact that this show gang-fucked the lore of a lot of things and gang-fucked the location of where Shady Sands is even supposed to be, I have to ask, how the hell does this show get every single date correct except this exact one? Am I supposed to believe that the show that gets every single date right got this very specific and very important date wrong? They could have said Shady Sands was founded slightly differently in terms of years. That wouldn't have been a big issue. They could have said that the New California Republic was created a year later or so, and that wouldn't have been a big deal, because a declaration does not mean a creation. But no, they got the date of 2277 for Shady Sands falling, and in case you don't know, 2277 is the date of the first Battle of Hoover Dam and is also 200 years exactly after the war led to the end of the world. You could just say that they were trying to be poetic. 200 years after the atomic war, there is another atomic blast that ends civilization, but I am very fucking weirded out about the fact that they managed to get every single goddamn date correct except exactly this. In case you don't know, Fallout New Vegas is a game that takes place in 2281, but its story goes back to 2274, although things only really come to a head in 2277, of course, when the first Battle of Hoover Dam takes place. Oh, what, did you just think that the Fallout New Vegas footage that you're seeing in the background was random and that it had nothing to do with the fact that I was reviewing this, well, show? See, that's subtle contrast that a lot of people wouldn't have actually noticed. Shady Sands having fallen in 2277 makes 99% of the events in Fallout New Vegas outright impossible. And I say 99% because the 1% that actually is still possible is when the NCR enters the Mojave Desert in in 2274. Every single person in the Mojave that knows anything about NCR says, yes, Shady Sands is fine. Yes, it has some issues, but yes, Shady Sands is fine. The army's still there. The army hasn't retreated. The NCR is still clearly functioning perfectly. Minus the fact that they don't want to send reinforcements to the Mojave because it's politically troubling. But there is not one single mention of anything like this ever happening, or even a single mention that anything like this might be happening. I guess it's just a coincidence that every single retcon that has happened so far are things that mainly destroy things that weren't created by Bethesda. And I think it's also just a coincidence that Shady Sands' location got moved. What Shady Sands is got moved. And I suppose it's also just a coincidence that this single chalkboard, along with everything the show has been telling us up to this point, makes one very specific game outright impossible to happen. And don't give me that bullshit about fall meaning decline, you stupid son of a bitch. There is an image there of a nuclear blast, but it's not dated, which means that the previous date mentioned is associated with whatever the image represents. Just accepting that cope for a moment, even if we completely disregard how chronological charts are made, the argument that, oh no, Shady Sands is actually in decline, that's still fucking stupid because it makes a lot of the things in New Vegas outright impossible, but let me tell you why that's bullshit. You see, the main cope around this argument saying that it's actually not retconning New Vegas is that the fall doesn't mean the fall, but means start of a decline. Because, and this is the most common example, the fall of Rome. Because I guess the fall of Rome was in 394 BC, and that's when we date the fall of Rome as happening. Because I guess Berlin actually fell in 1939 and not in 1945 in World War II. Because I guess the fall of Constantinople, the city, by the way, was actually in 1327 and not in 1453. It's a dumb fucking argument and completely ignores the fact that when we talk about the fall of Rome, which by the way isn't comparable to Shady Sands because one is an empire, the other is a city, but it's a dumb fucking argument because it ignores the fact that when we talk about the decline of Rome, we specifically use the word decline or start of the fall, and that fall of something means the end. The people who will tell you countless times, endlessly, will just grate it in your fucking ear about how you're a media illiterate person are completely illiterate themselves, and it relies entirely on your fucking ignorance to even work. Faithful adaptation to the show, good for the lore, adds new mysteries. Every single person who came up with that is a fucking idiot. Licking the boot of a bunch of paper-shuffling jackasses who can't stand the fact that people 25 fucking years ago wrote something better than they did, and that they have never come close to so much as touching the sole of the heel of the boot of the people who wrote this. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a New Vegas purist, aren't I? I guess the fall of Beijing during the fucking Sino-Japanese War of the 1930s and 40s actually happened in 1899, and that I'm just too media illiterate to understand that. Fuck every single one of you who defended this in my comment section and tried to educate me about how I don't know how to read a graph. Because apparently you can't either, as if you remember back from episode 1, this show had another chronological graph with images associated to it, and as we can clearly see from that graph, if the image does not represent a separate date, then it is not given a separate date. That's just a lot of coincidences, don't you think? They retconned Fallout 1 by putting Vault 33, 32, and 31 in pure eyesight of the cathedral. They changed Shady Sands' location to the Boneyard, completely eliminate the Boneyard from existence. They retconned the ghouls, they retcon Vault experiments, they retcon Fallout Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel, they rip off Fallout Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel, they retcon how ghouls even exist, they rewrite the Brotherhood of Steel, and now they completely eliminate Shady Sands using the very exact fucking year that would make Fallout New Vegas impossible. Oh, and before I forget, if you just say that they moved capitals to the Boneyard and renamed it to Shady Sands, well, why does the sign say first capital of the new California Republic and not second? Ugh, fucking hell, I could keep talking about this for longer than this fucking episode has any substance to it. But I'm not going to because I have a lot of other things to say. Because you see, I think that they wanted to trash on the memory of everything that was old Fallout. I legitimately believe that everyone involved in the production of this show, story-wise, outright hates the West Coast and want to destroy it on a fundamental level, spitting on the image of everything the West Coast was. Don't believe me? Lucy joins some of the Shady Sands refugees in a vault for a ceremony that they have. And while at first it seems like a relatively innocent coping session with the fact that Shady Sands is gone, it quickly devolves into a lot of people taking off their clothes, drinking blood and pouring it down their naked upper bodies, and bathing in the ashes, actual ashes of of dead Shady Sands refugees. All the while they're chanting, "Bring back Shady Sands, blood must spill," and honoring Moldaver by doing this, but like a bunch of fucking pagan cultists, calling her the Flame Mother. All the while humming and swaying as if they're a bunch of hypnotized zombies. While yes, some people would be driven to desperation by the fact that they just lost their home, I just think that you probably wouldn't come up with any of this shit unless you were trying to trash on what Shady Sands and the NCR actually was. In fact, you might just not be a Fallout player at all and you might not know fucking anything about Fallout. And even you might be weirded out by this shit. I don't think I need to tell you that this isn't anywhere near appropriate to what California actually was in Fallout, to know that this is a massive bastardization of what it was. So Lucy reacts how I did in sheer disbelief and gets the fuck out of there and goes to level 12, a place she wasn't supposed to go. And while in level 12, she figures out that there were creepy experiments taking place there that really make no sense, such as a pregnant woman birthing piranhas. You know, the fish that bite because apparently they had to shock the audience somehow. And when someone else comes in to check on the vault experiment, including a lot of people that are just frozen there, she panics, thinking that they're all lunatics, rightfully so, throws acid in their face and tries to run away, but gets caught. This is fake drama and fake hype for the next episode, by the way, but I have to hold that for a second because I have to mention some events that were happening all the while this shit was going on in Vault 4. Cooper Howard had been arrested by the people who presented themselves as being from the government, not government, because redneck's scary, I guess. They arrest him and they're going to hold a mock trial for him, these three idiots. But because every single character in this show is absolutely retarded and characters just need to get out of conflict because the script says so, Cooper Howard, who still has a missing finger, manages to convince them to untie him, all the while he sews his finger back together, it magically works, and he murders everyone there. Despite the intention of these three stooges having been to actually kill Cooper Howard. By the way, remember when I said that this only happens because the show needs an excuse to have Cooper Howard join back up with the main characters? Well, it's exactly here that he sees a portrait of Moldaver, someone who is said to be very well known. Which makes me wonder how the fuck he didn't know Moldaver was alive, considering Moldaver presented herself as being very fucking famous way back in episode 1, even going as far as saying that everybody knows who she is. And that's the end of episode 6. Good God, what a travesty. Not only has this show been contradicting itself time and time again so far, but it's also been retconning other games and other concepts entirely. It isn't even entertaining, it isn't consistent, it isn't clever, and it keeps writing itself into a wall and they have to come up with stupid excuses for characters to remain relevant. But if there's one thing these show writers have succeeded in when it comes to actually making this show, is creating a joke. Because that's what Fallout is now. Episode 7 starts and we get another SEAL audience clapbait by showing us NCR Ranger armor that looks worse than fan projects from 7 years ago. If you think this means any Rangers are still around, no, it's just scavenged Ranger armor that looks absolutely shit. Cooper has gone to the house of some scavengers to trace the origins of the bounty. This scene has a few issues, but it's one of the ones that I can actually commend in the show. Acting's good, music's fine, shots are good, no problems there. Eventually, he gains the information that the Griffith Observatory is the place where Moldaver is. And after baiting the Sun, one of the characters there, to attack him, he kills them. Because they've got to set up tension for season 2, I suppose, but not a problematic scene, I'm fine with it. Back in an old world scene, Cooper Howard does not like what he's hearing from Moldaver and tries to leave the session, which is taking place in what looks to be like a church or something? Ironic, given that a confrontation then starts where Cooper Howard accuses them of being a bunch of communists. To which he's accused by one of the members there of being a fascist. Ironic, I know. Why is it ironic? Because then Moldaver tries to approach him and convince him that she's not a communist. Just saying, buddy, if you're attracting a bunch of people whose first reaction is to call you a fascist when you disagree, then I think you're a bunch of commies. But Moldaver is a strong female character, and because she's a strong female character, she somehow manages to convince Cooper Howard to spy on his own wife. It's here where we get the revelation that the strong female character communist actually figured out infinite energy via cold fusion. But because capitalism, it was forced to be bought out by VTEC. I'll get to this later, but just keep in mind that Moldaver had figured out infinite energy. Back at the vault, the overseer and his assistant at the vault try to explain to Lucy what's happening in the vault via those experiments. And they show a recording which seems to be in defense of continuing experiments, but actually we're then told that they were showing it as evidence of the past misdeeds of former vault heads. I'm glad we were told this, because if we weren't, then I wouldn't have figured that out, because it really did seem like they were trying to justify carrying out experiments on people. Apparently one of the experiments was turning people into gulpers, which if you can turn people people into gulpers, why then is it the most intricate mutation a guy with a nose on his head and a dude with one eye? Oh, that's right, CGI budget, never mind. Lucy is then gonna be held on trial, and Maximus, who is completely in love with vault life, only now figures out that there might be something wrong with the vault and decides to take action. Action we're not yet due to see because we cut back to Thaddeus, whose foot is so destroyed that he really shouldn't have been able to walk, much less carry all of those things, but the show wants him to keep moving, so I guess he has to keep moving. I'm not kidding when I say that WATERFALL, the Enclave scientist, had more chances of continuing to walk than Thaddeus did, but it's Thaddeus that keeps moving, not WATERFALL. Thaddeus decides to put the dog in a Nuka-Cola container. Yeah, remember the dog? Yeah, he's been around this entire time. But he puts the dog in a Nuka-Cola container and walks away to try to find a radio station to contact the Brotherhood. Why squires don't have radios of their own, I don't know. But let me just take a second to point out that it's really fucking arbitrary that this dog just continues to be found by relevant characters. And I'm pretty sure this is also animal abuse, but whatever. We cut back to the vault where Lucy's gonna be held on trial, but before I talk about that, this show has been jumping back and forth a lot to mask the fact that there's not much going on actually, and this is part of the reason why I split the plot review the way I did. Because with all these jump cuts, it's hard to focus on one given thing. Anyway, now the entire vault are acting like a bunch of crazy cultists, not just the Shady Sands refugees, and Lucy looks like she's going to be executed with a sword. A very brutal punishment, but given how these are a bunch of crazy cultists and Lucy did throw acid in the face of one of them, I can kind of understand. But if your memory is longer than 5 minutes, you'll notice that I said all of this is actually fake drama. Because this show is this show and it cannot take itself seriously for more than 5 literal minutes. And characters just need to get away from conflict because the script said so and because the writers think that without jokes every 3 goddamn minutes, the audience will get bored. Because it thinks you're a bunch of children. So Lucy's punishment isn't actually getting executed by sword, but it's banishment to the outside, and they even give her 2 weeks supplies despite saying that she's gonna die almost instantly because the wasteland is so dangerous. The same vault that can go up into the wasteland and carry power armor across a city back down to their vault thinks that she's basically gonna die instantly and are giving supplies to the very person they're trying to punish. But that's not before we get 15 straight seconds of the vault overseer trying to use the sword to cut her from the restraints he put her in. Aren't you glad that the show that deals with the nuclear apocalypse and the greed of mankind has now turned into a failed comedy show? I'm not even angry anymore, I'm just really disappointed and sad. So Lucy, whose goal was to leave the vault, is being punished by being given supplies so she can leave the vault when Maximus walks in and oh god damn it, come on! Maximus is going on a tard rage with his fucking oldie music and power armor. He stole the fusion core from the vault's energy to supply to beat everybody up, and despite being able to clearly see that Lucy is more than fine, it takes him way too long to realize that Lucy is actually okay. Have you ever come across a show that's so bad and annoying that you just don't even want to review it to complain about it? That's how this episode makes me feel. And it's the second filler episode, by the way, because we're already 27 minutes into it. Hey, makes my job easier. Anyway, Lucy manages to convince him to give back the fusion core for the power armor, and it takes quite a bit of convincing, but eventually he agrees. Oh, and by the way, we also get a line of dialogue saying that Lucy's dad, Hank, would be really disappointed if he found out that Lucy let a community die for the sake of saving him. The ironic part being that thing I told you about the previous episode of Hank going to be revealed to have been the one that nuked Shady Sands. As if we couldn't realize from episode 1 that Hank was hiding something. No, really, I've been playing stupid this entire review to simulate the average viewer of this show. But the reality is that I had figured out back in episode 1 that Hank was probably a bad guy. Though I hadn't clued in the fact that it would be Hank that would manage to have a nuke in his inventory and nuke a city. But back to the show. After Lucy has a whole conversation about how Maximus did the right thing and how he's a good guy, Maximus reveals the truth that he's not actually Knight Titus and tells her the truth, to which Lucy says that they're both kind of bad guys because she did throw acid in a man's face. Yeah, Lucy, the difference being that you didn't know they were actually just idiots, and that Maximus is responsible for the deaths of one guy, almost responsible for the death of another guy, both of which he's supposed to be brother-in-arms for, and has been lying this whole time. Oh, and the fact that he kind of ignored the fact that you were fine just to go beat up a bunch of vault dwellers. Though I do believe that was him just being stupid, but I don't understand how Maximus is supposed to be a good guy character that we're supposed to cheer for. He has been doing nothing right this entire time. Other than telling you the truth now, because when he saved you originally, that was because he wanted a power fantasy. One thing I skipped because I didn't want to bother talking about episode 2 much longer than I did. It changes nothing in the end, but whatever. Okay, I feel like enough time has passed so that I can actually talk about this character, Lucy. In case you haven't realized it by now, Lucy's character is a fucking mishmash of ideas that they can't properly connect together. You see, just about every single time Lucy talks, the show tries to convince you that she's naive, innocent, and has no idea what's going on. Which ends up being the justification for a lot of the actions that she takes. From trying to dialogue with fiends at the bridge, to trusting everything she's told and just blindly following it. The show tries really damn hard to convince you that she has no idea what's going on. But the problem is that you can't have such a character when this show's first interaction with Lucy was to have her see her friends and family die getting brutally massacred, and the man she was supposed to marry and had sex with trying to kill her twice. It also doesn't work given how she saw her father drown a man, and was witness to a conversation with the leader of a raider group, or at least we believe it to be the leader of a raider group, that makes it clear that everything in the Wasteland isn't very simple and that it's very serious. So if you have a memory and you simply remember things that just keep happening to Lucy, her innocent personality just outright does not work. She tries to even dialogue with Cooper Howard and assumes he's willing to act in good faith just after he's murdered an entire town right in front of her eyes. A conflict which, might I remind you, he initiates. But then when the show tries to add depth when there is none, she acts suspicious and needs to be convinced to save Maximus, the one guy in the entire show that's gone out of his way to save her life. Maximus took no fewer than 20 bullets protecting her, and yet he's the only one that Lucy acts with some suspicion towards. And yet when Maximus later reveals to Lucy that he's been lying to her the entire time, Lucy reverts to her innocent character and just believes him and accepts it. Despite the fact that Maximus admits that, much like everybody else in the Wasteland that she's complained about, he watched a man die and has been acting selfishly. Now tell me something, are we supposed to root for this character? Are we supposed to see her development as anything other than forced? Not only is someone I'm told is a great actor forced to act retarded by bad direction, which outright prevents her from reacting appropriately to what she's supposed to be seeing, but then they get someone who is supposed to be an experienced actress and then flip how she's supposed to behave. All because they had to have her be innocent, they had to have her be naive, but also wanted to have a bunch of events that outright contradict the need and chance to even be like that. Lucy has gone through more things than even some Wastelanders have, and yet she reacts as if she's gone through none. And if you're wondering why that is, you really haven't been paying attention to the things I've been recounting about this show, have you? Because this show just uses the excuse that every character is retarded. They justify characters being able to react to things and knowing what to do, and then outright ignore it because the characters are supposed to be retarded. And while it might work even in a serious Fallout show, once or twice, it just doesn't work when it ends up being every single one of them. But remember back in episode 2 when I said that a character was introduced in the worst way possible, the chicken fucker? Well, he's back now because Thaddeus just so happened to run into him. Because of course, of all characters to be introduced and actually be important later, it was the guy who was fucking chickens. Who is only alive because Maximus is a moron. The chicken fucker offers to fix Thaddeus's foot for a price. Thaddeus looks like he's just gonna shoot him from behind, understandably enough, I would too. But eventually the chicken fucker convinces him that if he did, he wouldn't know what medicine to take. And Thaddeus, because he didn't put any skill points into barter, decides to pay with the fusion core from Maximus's power armor. I'm not even gonna question it. So Thaddeus takes the medicine and we can see that his foot that was barely recognizable as a foot with broken bones, broken nerves and all that shit just fixes itself within 5 seconds. And this medicine, this fucking medicine breaks the show's consistency yet again, but I can't talk about that just yet. But with his foot fixed, Thaddeus walks away. So Cooper Howard, who's been lagging behind for like 2 or 3 days, manages to catch up to Thaddeus almost and finds the dog at the Nuka-Cola container in the gas station. Look, I love animals just as much as the next person, but it's getting kind of ridiculous that this show just keeps forcing the dog to be with one of the main characters, and I'm kind of hoping that the dog just died right there. Also, I guess Cooper Howard must have fast traveled because that was really fucking fast. And we're back to an old world scene where Cooper Howard is convinced to put a tracker on Barbara, his wife's Pip-Boy. He regrets it for almost doing something so stupid, but then after Barbara acts very corporate and evil, he goes back out to where he put the tracker and puts it in Barbara's Pip-Boy again after having taken it off. Back to Thaddeus again. He's now at a radio station. Thaddeus is shown to have bypassed a bunch of traps that were just laid on the ground because they were really fucking obvious, set by the guy who's operating the radio station to deter raiders, despite every single one of them being very obvious. It's here that I can't actually have any footage from the show on screen because this is the scene with the CGI so bad that I can't actually show it because it makes my eyes hurt. But Thaddeus, who has at least a 3-day head start on Maximus and Lucy, finds out that Maximus and Lucy have caught up to him in the span of less than half a day. He tries to shoot them but misses every shot because it's a game reference, get it? It's supposed to be funny because in the games you have a high percentage chance of hitting them, but sometimes you just don't hit. Isn't this funny? Please clap. After missing every single shot and all the danger that these characters had being thrown out the window, Thaddeus gives up, steps on a trap has an arrow impaled through his neck, and we figure out that he's not actually dead. Which is supposed to be the big revelation that the medicine that Thaddeus took turned him into a ghoul. Now, quick question, if that medicine legitimately makes you bulletproof, basically, and makes you heal instantly by turning you into a ghoul, then how the hell does Cooper Howard, and now Thaddeus, I guess, manage to just tank damage and not die, when every other ghoul in the show can get one-tapped? I don't know, and the show doesn't either. But really, it gives an excuse as to why Thaddeus can't actually return to the Brotherhood now, because the Brotherhood doesn't like ghouls. So, seeing this, Maximus, whose entire survival relies on bringing Wiltzig's head back to the Brotherhood, gives Lucy the head, picks up a random head that was on the ground, bashes its face in so people can't recognize it, kisses Lucy because they're romantically attracted to one another now for some reason, I don't get it, and boards the vertibird. All the while, Thaddeus fucks off to somewhere else and Lucy goes to the Griffith Observatory. You know, that thing she was almost at multiple times already. Boy, it sure is lucky that Thaddeus didn't notice that Wiltzig had a Pip-Boy tracker shoved up his nose. And it sure is satisfying to see that we now have an actual romantic plotline going on. I'm joking, of course. It wasn't earned and there was never any implication that they had any romantic attraction towards one another. Or maybe there was and I just missed it because this show's writing is awful. Or maybe because I can't recognize what love is anymore. I don't know, you pick. But that was the end of episode 7. Another episode which could have been a small segment of another episode dragged out into its own entire thing. It was another waste of time, but because it's a waste of time, it's actually consistent with how this show has been so far. And now we get to the big one, episode 8, the real fucking big one. Strap yourselves in because I'm going to describe a lot of events because there is not one single thing correct with this entire episode. So Maximus is being taken back to the Brotherhood High Command, which took over Philly for some reason and are bragging about having massacred the entire place. Why are they doing this? Why are they laughing about it? I don't fucking know. The Brotherhood has been rewritten so hard that it's now a vegan enclave. And I don't think even Fallout 2 Enclave was this cartoonishly evil. So he goes to them, still pretending to have the real head instead of outright telling them the truth. We see that there's a female Brotherhood of Steel squire. I thought it was a brotherhood, but whatever. But he's quickly found out and set to be executed. And when Maximus is about to be executed, they start chanting in Latin because now they think the Brotherhood of Steel are a bunch of religious zealots or something. I'm not even a fan of the Brotherhood of Steel. I think they should be bombed into and out of oblivion. And even I'm embarrassed. But Dane, remember Dane, interjects and says that Dane was the one who put the razor blade and that Maximus wasn't actually the one who tried to sabotage the mission. Because of course, the one transgender character they wanted to have in the show was immediately the one to self-harm. Maximus claims to know the real location of where the head is, finally, and instead of just throwing him in a cage and forcing him to tell them where the head actually is, they actually believe him. Because of course, every character in this show is retarded and it's meant to be retarded. I suppose that's the only explanation as to how this even fucking works. And the head scribe takes Maximus away for a private conversation where he says that the Brotherhood used to rule the Wasteland.
We once ruled the Wasteland.
Motherfucker, when was that the case? The Brotherhood of Steel has never ruled the Wasteland. In Fallout 1, when they're at the height of their power, they're still a minor faction. In Fallout 2, they barely exist and are on the brink of extinction. In Fallout 3, they're a bit better, but they're still fighting a losing battle and split in 2 groups. In Fallout 4, they're only powerful because they have a magic blimp that apparently can only be taken down with a magic big cannon. And the whole point of the Brotherhood of Steel is that they have different chapters, i.e., they spread their forces very thin across continental America. I mean, for fuck's sake, in Fallout New Vegas, they got gang-fucked by the NCR so hard that they're now just a bunch of remnants hiding in a bunker. Oh wait, I forgot, Fallout New Vegas doesn't exist because this show said so. And believe it or not, this show hasn't even finished saying so. And after yet another kid in a fridge, we then cut back to Lucy, who is finally at the Griffith Observatory, a place that's a 6-hour walk in modern LA from Vault 33. And given how she's been to every single corner of LA, I really have to wonder how the fuck it took her at least 2 weeks to get here. How do I know it took her over 2 weeks to get here? Because she says so. Even though the show sets it up to be at like 5 days at most. The Griffith Observatory is the base of the NCR remnants, and I'll talk about them in just a second, and I say just a second because we cut back to another old world scene, where Cooper Howard is dropping off Barbara at the VTEC office. Barbara is very weirded out by the fact that her Pip-Boy is, as she states, transmitting something to somewhere. And instead of just disabling her Pip-Boy given that she's about to go into a very important meeting, she just sticks with it. Cooper, who wants to listen in on whatever conversation they're going to have, goes into the building, meets pre-war Betty, who's just a secretary, I guess she got promoted at some point, I don't know, and prepares to listen in on the conversation, but I skipped the scene, because this show starts hopping around back and forth a lot this episode. So to deal with that, we'll handle the pre-war segment first, because if we didn't, I'd be referring to scene changes literally every 20 seconds. So Cooper is listening in on a conversation that Barbara is a part of, and Bud is there as well. In this meeting are a bunch of CEOs of big corporations, Big Mountain, Retcon, and fuck you, that's not Robert House. It is kind of nice that Robert House has one quip that's actually Robert House-esque, and that is when Robert House says that one of them is so incompetent they could lose money running a casino. Anyway, the meeting is a generic capitalism evil meeting where they're discussing how peace talks between China and America set them back on their goals. This is despite the fact that we already know that a lot of the CEOs of these companies in the games are supposed to not want a war to happen, VTEC being the one excluded. Because of course they had to bastardize some of the most recognizable names in Fallout, just for the sake of their capitalism evil message. Anyway, they actually start humoring the idea of what it would be like after the end of the world, and how they could profit from it. And the CEO of WestTech actually makes a very good point that people could just very much still be alive after the people in the vaults come out. Also putting forth the idea that a lot of the people who survive might just be Stone Age creatures, who will kill anyone on sight. To which Bud responds with, time is the ultimate apex predator. No, Bud. Time is effectively a guarantee that society will begin to reorganize and that this plan would fail fucking immediately. Which it did, because a bunch of countries were fucking created while your people were still in a vault. Oh no, sorry, I forgot. The show retconned it, and now NCR is just Shady Sands, which is a tiny village in the Boneyard. And of course, if the dumb fucking messaging of these writers wasn't obvious enough, Bud has to say that time is how they'll win the great game of capitalism. This, thankfully, starts to be questioned by every single CEO, saying that he's not addressing any of the points and that this is downright retarded. Barbara interjects, and for a moment it feels like this show's gonna actually have some good writing, until you realize she's actually defending the idea of the vaults continuing, which means that, of course, she's still on board with the war continuing, to the point where everybody else gets nuked, even though she has an active fucking incentive not to want that to be the case. Her daughter Janie, which she brings up in this exact scene, and I want you to remember this for just a moment, she says that they have hundreds of vaults that each of the CEOs can claim as their own because the spirit of competition is what made their companies great. Just keep that in mind, because I feel like I'm about to explode like a fucking hydrogen bomb. This idea of each CEO being able to claim dozens of vaults as their own is apparently enough to get them all on board with the idea of vaults, and they start proposing experiments which make absolutely no fucking sense. The CEO of Big Mountain, which is supposed to be a scientist's paradise, suggests a vault where people compete to survive inside it, which is just dumb, and feels like whoever wrote this just read the summary of the summary of the summary to what Big Mountain was supposed to be. Retcon, the company that has a history of wanting space exploration and space science, decides that it's a good idea for an experiment in a vault where a robot that delivers milk to the front door runs the vault, because I don't fucking know. And a bunch of other stupid shit that shows the writers' lack of creativity is on display. The show also decides to retcon the whole point of super mutants existing, and shows a moment where the CEO of WestTech is shown to be the one who came up with the idea of the development of super mutants. Using illegal immigrants, of course, because haha, American capitalism evil isn't modern political reference really smart, I guess. Because of course they just had to throw in that retcon in there. But in case you don't know, the Super Mutant Project was a project by the American government to create super soldiers. Which, by the way, is exactly how the nuclear war started out, because the American government decided to start manufacturing a version of it, and China retaliated with nuclear warheads before they could have a biochemical weapon used on them. They just keep throwing retcon after retcon after retcon in single sentences, and then that's when Robert fucking House, CEO of Robco, says something that is so fucking fundamentally against who he is as a character that I can't help but take it as an insult, because it defeats the whole point as to why he's even a player in Fallout New Vegas and why Fallout New Vegas even exists. Listen to this shit.
It's a fun idea. There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world, but we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical.
You scum-sucking, paper-shuffling fucking retard, what the fuck? In case you don't know, Robert House was so fundamentally opposed to a nuclear conflict that he built giant laser cannons and hacked the Chinese systems to disable nuclear warheads and protect the city of Vegas. He was so dedicated to this that he put himself in a life preservation chamber and effectively became the defense system of New Vegas, while still being alive in said life preservation chamber. Robert House is a pragmatic man that only really cares about making money and making Vegas shine, and wants to actively avoid any conflict whatsoever to protect the light of Vegas. His defenses to protect against the nuclear holocaust were so strong that we see in Fallout New Vegas that Raul Terradas, a man from Mexico City, could see the lasers coming out of Vegas from Mexico City. And yet, now we're supposed to believe that Robert Edwin House, CEO of Robco, is okay with the world ending because of evil capitalism, and that we're supposed to believe that Robert House thinks that there's a lot of money to be made in the end of the world. How anyone takes this shit seriously is fucking ridiculous. There is no possibility to make money in the end of the world because the money is gone. The customers are gone. The resources are gone. A lot of the services a lot of people enjoy nowadays are gone. You can't sell people Funko Pops and a gaming console and a big flat screen TV in the end of the world if that consumer is more concerned about not dying from radioactive poisoning, you fucking idiots. This is a Reddit communist's understanding of what capitalism is. Also, I have to ask, if Robert House is in the meeting where they're discussing the end of the fucking world, then how the hell did Robert House fuck up the defense of New Vegas by 20 hours? Robert House's plan relied on getting the platinum chip, which has an upgraded OS before the nuclear bombs dropped, so he could defend Vegas with his upgraded system. What, did he just forget to fucking look at his calendar or something? Oh, but that's okay, because it was the Chinese that dropped the nuclear bombs, not VTEC. They wouldn't retcon that now, would they? Barbara opens up that black hole of a mouth she has again, and says that the end of the world is an opportunity because then there'll be no one to fight except each other, you fucking idiot. The spirit of competition is what made these companies great, yet here they are talking about how there will be no competition when the entire point of this experiment is that they will compete with one another. VTEC will compete with House. House will compete with Big Mountain. Big Mountain will compete with Retcon. Retcon will compete with WestTech. And then she says that they'll drop the bombs themselves. So yes, lovely, they just retconned every single fucking Fallout game. Because Fallout, in case you haven't realized that this entire fucking time, is about dealing with the fallout of the consequences of humanity's actions. So the whole point as to why the Brotherhood of Steel, that faction that Bethesda really fucking loves, exists, the whole point of the franchise and its themes, all gone. All fucking gone, because these writers want to spit on the franchise that was infinitely better written than anything they could come up with, and also partially because they wanted to shove their stupid fucking modern politics into it, and because they don't understand anything they're actually writing. And of course, the thrice lobotomized seals that defend this show think, oh, it's a critique of capitalism. That's actually really in line with the games. Because they're too fucking brain rotten to understand these very simple concepts. Because they can't leave their stupid modern politics aside for a second and think of things. Critiquing capitalism is actually very fucking easy, and the writing of this show makes it look outright impossible. Because this show is so dumb, the writers who want to critique capitalism want me to believe that the capitalists want the capital to be gone. How the fuck is anyone defending this shit? How the fuck does anyone think this is actually appropriate? Oh, but it gets worse, viewer, it gets worse, because then Barbara opens that black chasm of a mouth of hers and says,
and we have war. And war, well, war never changes.
Wait, I didn't hear that right. I must have heard that wrong. What the fuck did she just say?
And war, well, war never changes.
Oh, I can't believe it. I feel like I'm going fucking insane here. Let me explain this to the tourists pretending to actually play Fallout. The point of the line, war never changes, is to say that humanity will always find a reason to start killing one another. War never changes because it's in the human fucking DNA to seek conflict. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons communism is so fucking backwards. But the writers of this atrocity had no fucking clue as to what this line meant, because it's said by a person who is advertising an idea which inherently means conflict. She says she wants war to end because she wants to create a true monopoly, but that monopoly includes a bunch of companies which compete with each other. A competition which she incentivizes, except instead of being done by countries, it will now be done by companies. And don't give me that shit of, well, that's obvious, it's supposed to be fucked up because none of the characters in this fucking room should be going along with this. And all of them have direct incentives to not go along with it. Barbara in particular, because all of these guys have just the financial incentive. Barbara has the financial and the humanitarian incentive. No, they just put this here to spit in the face of Fallout fans. How could they fuck up the ghouls? How could they fuck up the vaults? How could they fuck up where Shady Sands is? How could they fuck up where the Cathedral and Vault 33 are? How could they fuck up the Brotherhood? How could they fuck up what the people of Shady Sands were like? How could they fuck up the point of the vaults? How could they rip off and retcon 2 games? How could they fuck up the years to the point where it retcons another game? The answer is actually very simple. They didn't. They didn't fuck up the chalkboard and the dates. They didn't fuck up the humor. They didn't fuck up the locations. They didn't accidentally rip off 2 games. They didn't fuck anything else up. This was deliberate. I'd be willing to accept it if they did it once or twice, but this entire show has been a sequence of fuck-ups. Or supposed fuck-ups. Supposed fuck-ups which just so happened to erase old Fallout and spit on everything that old Fallout was, and why people enjoyed it. They wanted to appropriate Fallout for their own means, so they wiped the slate clean, which just so happens to be something that is said and referred to multiple times in this show, wiping the slate clean. They don't want a post-apocalypse, they want a post-apocalypse, where everything is destroyed and stays destroyed, which by the way is something the writers admit to. Not that I give a shit about interviews because it was obvious enough from the show itself. But Enclave Emily, just turn your brain off. No, motherfucker, I will not turn my brain off when one of my favorite franchises is being trampled and being forced to birth piranha fish that eat it. And I just need to remind you all, again, if you enjoyed this show, if you had fun with it, fine, but if you're defending this shit on a fundamental level, you are lobotomized. You have a black hole in that thick titanium fucking skull of yours. You are denser than a neutron star if you believe in good faith that this show was actually faithful to the franchise, and you are a goddamn disgusting shill if you're actually defending this crap. How is it that a bunch of reviewers that make their money criticizing these exact practices being done to other franchises and other shows suddenly be okay with this being done to the Fallout franchise? I'll tell you why. Because they're shills. It's part of their act. They sell themselves to you as people who just want to tell the truth, to call out bad practices, but then they will excuse those very same bad practices if it so goddamn well fucking suits them. And I'm not even done with this fucking episode yet. Because Lucy has arrived at the Griffith Observatory and meets Moldaver, who is not only the leader of the NCR remnants because strong independent woman, I guess, and who seems to be unfazed by the fact that it's Lucy delivering the head to her, but she's also sat at a dinner table having dinner with a feral ghoul chained right next to her. Get ready, because this show is about to try to pass her off as the good guy, when our introduction to her was her massacring innocent vault dwellers indiscriminately. But before we actually get to that, if Moldaver was the one interested in Wiltzig's head, then why the fuck didn't she just get one of her guys to wait for him in fucking Philly and transport him to the fucking Griffith Observatory? I'll tell you why, because this show needed to happen, and if she did that, this show wouldn't happen. By the way, remember how I called the people Moldaver entered Vault 33 with raiders? Well, I see the cope that they're not actually raiders and they're NCR remnants. Well, for one, they behave like barbaric raiders. 2, Moldaver left them behind. 3, if she is actually the leader of the NCR remnants, then why the fuck didn't she just gun down everybody there with her small army? Because if we're supposed to believe that Moldaver has a manpower issue, and that's why she put out a bounty on Wiltzig, to have Wiltzig brought to her, then she wouldn't have left those people fucking behind if they were NCR remnants. And if she doesn't have a manpower issue, then again, why not just put a dude waiting in Philly for Wiltzig? I could keep talking about the stupidity of this entire plan, but let's just keep going. Lucy delivers the head to Moldaver, and Moldaver withdraws the cold fusion that was hidden in Wiltig's head. Yes, it's been cold fusion this entire time. But Moldaver doesn't want to let Hank go yet, because she needs the code from Hank and has been unable to get it this entire time. And, Moldaver, quick question. If you needed the code from Hank, then you needed some leverage to get Hank to tell you the code, right? Then why the fuck did you try to kill every single other Vault Dweller? Why the fuck did you allow your raiders to almost kill Lucy and Norm, Hank's children? Hell, it's revealed here that Moldaver was actually a friend of Rose, Lucy's mom. Yet both her children almost fucking died as a direct consequence of your actions, you stupid bitch. Also, she's supposed to be a friend of Rose, Lucy's mom, yet in case you haven't figured it out, the ghoul over there on the table is Rose. Yeah, that's the sign of someone who's actually a good friend of yours. That's the sign of a good hero character. Just almost fucking murders the children of her best friend, massacres a bunch of innocent Vault Dwellers, and then when her best friend turns into a ghoul, she lets her go feral, cuts off her arm, and ties her up to a dinner table. This is where we get the revelation that Hank was actually the one who nuked Shady Sands, and that Moldaver this entire time was just fighting for cold fusion. Cold fusion, which could have put a stop to the endless resource wars. See, folks, Moldaver is actually the good guy. She's been trying to provide power to the power to the fucking but couldn't because evil VTEC, who's evil because capitalism and capitalism evil, didn't let her. And she explains to Lucy that Hank is actually the bad guy because again, he was the one that nuked Shady Sands. But then Hank comes up with this explanation that, oh my fuck, he says that the outside world is dangerous and that the only way to stop the danger is to get rid of the factions that are always fighting, which is very fucking confusing because VTEC's entire plan is to create a bunch of factions which compete with one another. And this, by the way, is something that he knows and is completely on board with. Lucy being in abject disbelief at the fact that she's surrounded by retards and somehow being convinced by the woman who massacred most of her close friends back at the vault, does the sad puppy eyes and convinces Hank to give Moldaver the code. What, we're supposed to believe that Moldaver invented cold fusion and machines that can operate with cold fusion, but needs a code to activate it? What, she needs a code to activate the machine she invented? Also, if Moldaver was one of the people that Rose became friends with, then how the fuck did Hank not recognize Moldaver when she breached Vault 33? Oh my god. I'm just gonna stop thinking about it. Anyway, the machine is powered up and all that Moldaver has to do is press a big red button. But she deliberates for a retardedly long amount of time, and that's just about enough time for us to see the Brotherhood of Steel, which begins indiscriminately bombarding the fucking Griffith Observatory, shooting at both armed and unarmed people. I was actually getting kind of pumped because this is the last episode, so this is gonna be the final battle. It's gonna be the battle where they take themselves seriously, right? It's gonna be the battle that's really intense and... God damn it! Another fucking oldie song in the final battle! So the Brotherhood of Steel starts massacring a bunch of innocent people because of course they do. Backed up by their squires who only have pistols and no power armor because I guess... just fucking don't question it anymore. The NCR remnants come out of the Griffith Observatory with the second laser weapon of this entire show. And despite being a fight between two very well-armed factions, they all decide to go into melee range and fight with flagpoles because they wanted to create a cool, intense shot to show the final stand of the NCR because yes, I guess they really did just want to destroy it for good. And the Brotherhood of Steel enter the Griffith Observatory. 3 power-armored knights and a bunch of other squires along with the head scribe are in there. But they're forced to stop because when they turn around and how the fuck did he get here? Cooper Howard just teleports behind the Brotherhood of Steel inside the Griffith Observatory somehow without alerting any of the NCR remnants or the Brotherhood of Steel. And because he's one of the main characters, the knights just don't shoot him and let him talk. And it's a good thing they do because Cooper Howard then explains to us that he actually knows of a defect in the power armor that makes them vulnerable to one-taps. Remember that back in episode 7? Again, how the fuck did he have so much trouble dealing with Maximus but just knows about this now? What, did he unlock some hidden fucking memories or something? Well, it doesn't matter because the knights, at hearing this information, instead of just outright shooting him in the face right then and there, just wait for him to continue talking. And as he does, Cooper just turns off the lights and starts massacring every single member of the Brotherhood of Steel there. How the fuck can he see in the dark, and why can nobody in the Brotherhood of Steel turn on the flashlights that they have on their helmets to see where Cooper is? They had to have a cool scene where Cooper Howard just demolishes the entire Brotherhood of Steel, and despite it making no sense, and despite the fact that Cooper really should have been turned into paste right there, he just gets perfect one-taps on every single goddamn member of the Brotherhood of Steel in there, except Maximus, of course, because he's important to the plot and everybody else isn't. Moving on, despite being told that the power armor does not function without the helmet, previously in the show, a bit of power armor just walks in, decapitated, without a helmet, into the exact room that Lucy and Hank are in. Because the plot's gonna need power armor to be there, so the power armor is there. At the same time, Maximus walks in, finds Lucy, who just refuses to explain anything to him, frees Hank, who gets in the power armor that shouldn't work because it doesn't have a helmet, and only then does Lucy inform Maximus that Hank is the one responsible for Shitty Sands getting nuked. We get another kid in a fridge, and then Hank, because he doesn't have a helmet, has his head exposed to Maximus, and Maximus could very easily shoot him, but instead of this, Maximus tries to melee Hank for some reason, and gets tossed by the force of power armor, cracking his head against the wall and seemingly left for dead. Maximus is definitely dead, right? That power armor can destroy entire fucking buildings. There is no way Maximus is going to survive smacking his head against a wall after being tossed by power armor. He's dead, right, isn't he? Lucy finally decides to grow a pair and aims a gun at Hank but doesn't kill him because he's daddy. And it looks like she's completely going to chimp out and that Hank is gonna kill her, when Hank, who has his back turned to the door and thus cannot be headshot from behind, gets headshot from behind by Cooper, who teleports there. No, seriously, that angle makes no sense. And Cooper, now with Hank at his mercy, demands to know where his family is. Instead of disabling that power armor or shooting Hank right then and there, he just lets him escape, because this show wouldn't have a fucking season 2 otherwise. Lucy does what Moldaver would have reasonably done if she was a normal person and not a secret monster, and puts her mom out of her misery and goes with the ghoul to find Hank. Hank, who, by the way, teleported to the Mojave Desert and is going to New Vegas. That's not what New Vegas looks like. Oh, they're gonna fuck it up, aren't they? I wouldn't be surprised at this point. They've already retconned everything before. Why wouldn't they retcon even more things? I guess they had to have the next season in New Vegas to rub a salty lemon in the wounds. We then cut to nighttime. I have to wonder how long does it take for the Brotherhood of Steel to climb a flight of stairs, and Maximus wakes up alone in the Griffith Observatory. Just in time, because as he wakes up, Moldaver walks in, bleeding out, apparently having been shot in the chest, and before she dies, she turns on the cold fusion machine and wait, stop, no, just stop. Stop, this is ridiculous. This city is Los Angeles, California, a city that got nuked dozens of times before the war and got nuked after the war, relatively recently in fact. And yet Moldaver presses a button on the machine and apparently all of these people have power now? All of these collapsed and ruined buildings have power? What, did Moldaver and the NCR remnants rewire every single cable in this goddamn town? Oh sorry, this goddamn city? I mean, for fuck's sake, even some of the collapsing buildings which are about to fall down still light up with power. Did the writers of this show just think that power comes from a single button on the wall? Ah, fuck it, it's stupid. Anyway, Moldaver sits down next to Rose, who she again claims to have been her friend, but she kept her as a fucking feral ghoul for some reason, and she dies. All the while, Maximus is just sitting there watching. And that's when, and I can't believe this actually happened, the rest of the Brotherhood walks in, finds Maximus with a gun in his hand and a dead Moldaver, and Dane, who is just a squire, assumes that Maximus killed Moldaver, and they all hail Maximus as a knight. What the fuck? He's suspected of wounding a fellow brother and gets promoted to squire, and now he tries to melee a guy in power armor, passes out, wakes up at a convenient time, and gets promoted to knight. And the show plays an epic song as if we're supposed to be cheering this. Also, he gets hailed as a knight by Dane. Dane is only a squire. Dane does not have the authority to call Maximus a knight. And the last scene we get to see is Cooper and Lucy following along trying to find out where Hank is, and the dog is there. For fuck's sake! The dog wasn't there at the Griffith Observatory. Why is it here now? God damn it! And that's the end of the show. To the tune of, you fucking guessed it, one last oldie song. Good God, what a horrendous piece of shit this show has been. A show that managed to retcon and rip off the Fallout franchise simultaneously. A show that hates you. A show that thinks you are just a seal that will clap along to anything sexual. A show that managed to turn a franchise which has always managed to balance humor with seriousness into a laughingstock of inconsistent writing and bad humor. The point of an entire franchise retconned in its entirety just because the showrunners either didn't understand it or just didn't didn't care. I am not so much dismayed at the fact that this show exists, as I am at the fact that this show is apparently considered canon and that it got the reviews that it did. I legitimately feel like the people defending this show are a case of mass psychosis. I mean, this show crossed a lot of the red lines that other shows did that got destroyed for it, and yet this show just managed to walk away. It's now very sadly considered canon and defended by people who believe a guy that has songs made about him for how often he lies. Look, I'm no New Vegas purist. Yes, Fallout New Vegas is my favorite game in the Fallout franchise, but that doesn't really say much. I just don't want a franchise that I've grown to love and which sparks my imagination almost every single day turned into a laughingstock and have everything I loved about it removed. Is that so wrong of me to not want a franchise to change and be turned into something that it is fundamentally opposed to? I don't think it is. You see, I've run into a lot of issues while making this review that have made me want to outright quit, including my save file of this project bugging out and making me lose over a week of work, but I kept going. Out of hate for this show, yes, but also out of sadness. Sadness at the fact that the franchise that told me to begin again was hijacked by people who don't want to begin again. Sadness at the fact that a lot of critics I respected have been revealed to be shills and hypocrites. Sadness that the franchise that managed to spark my imagination and light up my mind when it was previously in a dark abyss has now been violated to such a degree where I can't even recognize it anymore, no matter how many Vault Boys and Vault suits they put in it. I don't blame Bethesda for this show entirely. I don't blame Bethesda for what Fallout has become. I blame the people who have turned it into this by defending bad practices just because their standards are incredibly low. The fan base of a franchise which openly debated things, talked about different issues, topics that this franchise brought up, and enjoyed and was united. And that fan base, well, is now at war. And you know what they say, war never changes. But hey, at least we got a pretty good trilogy out of it, didn't we?